You speak. It contradicts the lie they live. By Amethyst Unarmed. Read by Kaiinbed. Part 7 of The Truth series. Relationship includes DabiHawks. Additional tags include violence, hurt comfort, blood and injury, kidnapping, hurt hawks, emotional manipulation, facing your abuser, torture, dadzawa, disassociation. Summary. Don't you dare. Hawks looks back over his shoulder and smiles. It isn't a smile Dabi knew personally, but he had heard of it. It's a smile Hawks gives to the people he saves. I guess I'm still a hero after all. Or, after what was supposed to be a simple arson, an ambush leads to Hawks getting recaptured by the Hero Public Safety Commission. A lot has changed since the last time he was there. Chapter 1. Dabi. It's a normal mission, the kind Hawks has been running for weeks now. Ever since Hawks' debut as a villain, he's been keen on helping gum up the works for things at the HPSC, and it seems Shigaraki has no mind to stop him. Whether it involved having Toga go undercover for espionage, or using Compress to sneak away with irreplaceable tech, Hawks has been incredibly successful in causing millions of dollars in property damage, as well as setting the commission back by months, maybe even years. He knows how the system works intimately, and as a result, knows exactly what will cripple them the most. Most of the operations were delicate, set up so the commission would never know what went wrong. Of course, Dabi's favorite were a little more noticeable. Demolition. It's nearly midnight. Hawks, as always, has insisted on carrying Dabi bridal style up to the roof. Flying still makes his stomach churn, but Hawks has started keeping Dramamine on his person at all times. It makes a warm, fuzzy feeling settle in Dabi's stomach. Probably nausea. They touched down onto the roof of the HPSC Quirk Registry building. It was a bigger target than they had gone after before, but perhaps a more important one as well. Spinner was the person who first brought the registry to their attention. The 7th floor housed the high-risk division. It was supposedly set up to keep track of the particularly dangerous quirks, yet 90% of its recorded members had mutant quirks, and the other 10% were considered to be less than desirable. The whole thing reeks of discriminatory bullshit. Dabi can turn a human being into a pile of ash in under 10 seconds, but he sure as fuck never had to go to any government-mandated checkups. Toga had slipped out halfway through that conversation. Given how quietly she had left, and how long Hawks spent in her room afterwards, Dabi figured she was pretty familiar with these assholes as well. Dabi never needed a reason to torch government property, but a little motivation never hurt. He couldn't help but grin at the thought. Remember, Hawks warned, don't start setting shit on fire until I make sure all the civilians are out of the building. He was in his new flight suit, a far cry from the bulky gear he wore before. It was streamlined and insulated, like pre-quirk diving suits. Crimson lines followed the seams of the suit, highlighting his every muscle and movement. There was no coat hiding the mass of muscles where his wings connected to his back. No boots squeezing his feet into some facsimile of human. Hawks had designed it to accentuate his mutant traits rather than mask them. It was sleek, stealthy, and, somehow, made Hawks even faster. Though, Dabi's favorite feature was the way it clung to his ass. Always so concerned for the public. Fucking hero. Hawks giggles and cuts in front of him. Aw, hot stuff, you're gonna hurt my feelings. He stretches his wings out and forward, nearly enveloping Dabi. It was something he'd been doing a lot lately, trying to make himself bigger, showing off his wings. Dabi's fairly certain it was supposed to be a mating display, but he didn't ask. It might make him stop. Hawks leaned forward, pressing his lips to Dabi's ear. He whispers the words along his jawline. Haven't you seen the news? I'm a villain through and through. He kisses the corner of Dabi's mouth. Dabi turns, fully intent on catching his lips and deepening the kiss. Wind gusts against his skin, and Hawks is across the roof, slicing the padlock off the door with one of his feathers. Tease. You love it. Hawks waits for him and holds the door, insistent on being a gentleman. They walk down the stairs together. They want to bring the whole building down, but the high-risk department was most important. Destroying the records on this floor would erase hundreds of vulnerable families from the Commission's radar. It could mean a whole different life for families like the Spinners, for little girls like Toga. The thought made Dobby's wrist steam. Go save the fucking cleaning lady or whatever, Dobby says. I want to burn this place into ash. His scars itch. Patience is a virtue, my love. Still, Hawk stills. His wings ruffle, feathers acting like individual satellites honing in on any vibrations. He frowns. What on earth? He murmurs, and his confusion prickles the hair on the back of Dobby's neck. What is it? In the office, there's no... His eyes snap open. Down! He collides with Dobby, pinning the two of them to the floor. Dobby gasps as the wind is knocked out of him. A white and yellow blur blasts over them. Gran Torino lands on the opposite wall and rebounds so he can land on his feet. Fuck, I hate this guy, Dobby thinks. It's a useless thought, of much less importance than, how did he find us, and are there more of them? But it's the only thought he is able to manage. Fuck, Hawks growls. It's an ambush. Great instincts, as always, Hawks, Gran Torino notes. He sounds like the disappointed grandparent Dobby never had. It's unfortunate that this is how you've chosen to use them. Hawks shoots a barrage of feathers at him, but Gran Torino easily bounces out of their way. Dobby remembers the fight at the bar, rolls out of the way just in time to avoid a kick to the jaw. Unfortunately, he isn't fast enough to move further, and it feels like he is watching from another room as Gran Torino backflips off the wall, up to the ceiling, and down onto Dobby's ankle. He feels something snap. Instinctively, Dobby's leg catch fire. The heat makes the air ripple, and Gran Torino has to flee or risk third-degree burns. Hawk screeches and claws at him as he passes. Gran Torino grunts as 4 cuts explode on his cheek, and drip red down his jaw. Hawks is already back on his feet, claws extended and wings as sharp as diamond. Switch! Dobby shouts and holds out his arms. Hawks falls back with immediate trust that, on most days, would make Dobby swoon. Instead, he lines the hallway with blue flame. The more obstacles between them and Gran Torino, the better. Dobby drags himself backwards using only his hands. The linoleum tugs against his sweaty palms, and his coat is being used as a dust mop, but it will all be worth it if he gets to Hawks. And then Dobby is drowning. Water like ice stabs through his skin. He can't breathe. His mouth, his nostrils flood. He can't breathe. The water pressure pushes him to the ground. He can't breathe. He tries to move, run, anything, but his ankle won't move. He can't. It stops. He gasps. He turns to the side, coughs water up his throat, up his nose. It burns as it comes back up. He curses as he retches on the floor. Hawks is in front of him. Someone grunts in pain. A hero is pinned to the wall by one of Hawks' feathers. It goes straight through the man's bicep. You good, hot stuff? The coat settles in his skin like it belongs there. His fire has never felt further away. Just peachy. Good. Hawks doesn't look at him. His eyes never leave the hero. He is frantically jerking, trying to get free. Now, Manuel, I really don't want to kill you, but try that again, and I'll risk losing the sleep. Manuel stops tugging at his arm. Gran Torino mutters something about kids these days, before launching. He tries to go for Dobby again, but Dobby's flames keep him from pinging around. Hawks meets him in the air and twists, using his wings for momentum as he catapults Gran Torino. Just before he hits the flame, a shield extends out to catch him. Fuck. Would you look at that, babe? We made it to the big leagues! Hawks crows. One of the top 5 heroes came out to greet us. He puffs up his wings. He's trying to make himself look bigger. You're welcome for the promotion, by the way. Feathers swell in a protective barrier in front of them before lashing out in concentrated streams. Crust is good, but Hawks is better. If he can just immobilize them. If Dobby can help. Dobby reaches forward, trying to keep his hands steady. His broken quirk has pulled the cold into his bones, and he can't stop shivering. He tugs at his fire, calls the warmth to his fingers. A fireball illuminates the hall. It glows a brilliant orange. Shit! Hawks lunges out of the way and sends the feathers to cover Dobby. Nearly half of his supply rain down as embers. At the other end of the hall stands Endeavor, a figure from a nightmare. He can hear his mother screaming. Gran Torino, the only hero with maneuverability on the same level as Hawks. Manuel, the direct counter to Dobby's quirk. Crust, a perfect defense from both of their long-range moves. And Endeavor, the hero who spores Hawks' one real weakness. Fire. This isn't just an ambush. It's an ambush designed for the two of them. And given the stiffness in Hawks' posture, he's realized it too. No, he can't let this happen again. Dobby watches Hawks look between him injured, shivering like a drowned cat. And the heroes, greater in number, power, and preparedness, and sees the moment he makes the decision. Don't you dare! I'm sorry, baby. You son of a bitch! Blue and orange fires blaze in the hallway. They sizzle as they die beneath Manuel's renewed onslaught. It's easier to be brave with the number one hero backing you up. Dabi tries to scramble to his feet. His ankle can't hold his weight. He can't lose someone to Endeavor again. He knows it can't have been more than a second, but it feels like an eternity. A window shatters behind him. Hawks looks back over his shoulder and smiles. It isn't a smile Dabi knew personally, but he had heard of it. It's the smile Hawks gives to the people he saves. I guess I'm still a hero after all. Dabi leaves the ground. He is being lifted by his coat, his waist, his feet. Feathers he hadn't even seen move are carrying him out the now open window. He thrashes against their hold. Hawks! He can only watch as Hawks approaches the line of heroes, holding only his longest primary feathers. Hawks! He can no longer see through the window. He tears against the feathers, with no leverage and no avail. Slowly, he is lowered towards the ground. Hawks! He gets no answer other than the feathers tightening around his waist. Some gross imitation of a hug. Dabi is 12 blocks away when the feathers drop him in the back alley. They suddenly fall from the sky like a puppet without strings. He hits the ground hard. He bites his tongue to keep from screaming as his ankle jolts against the asphalt. When he finally stops rolling, he can only lie there. His nervous system is alight with adrenaline and pain. The ground smells like motor oil and piss. His elbow is lying in something slimy. Hot stuff. You're an infection magnet. You need to take better care of your burns. He shudders to sitting upright. Red feathers litter the alley like debris from a falling star. Dabi pulls himself forward on his hands, grabbing as many as he can reach. You fucking bastard! Dabi shouts, hoping Hawks can actually hear him. I'll kill you myself if you don't fucking answer me. He waits for any flicker of movement, any sign that the person they were attached to was still fighting. They stay still. There is no one to witness Dabi clutch them to his chest. He releases a singular, broken sob. Chapter 2. Endeavor. The building is still smoking, though it seems that most of the flames have finally been extinguished. Most of the fighting had been contained to the hallway leading to the offices on floor 7. However, when facing Hawks, he had needed more fire than he was strictly cleared to use indoors. He had hoped Manuel would have been able to control the blaze, but he lost consciousness shortly after Dabi fled the scene. As a result, the fire had quickly spread to the nearby offices, only gaining in strength as it devoured cubicle after cubicle. Still, it had done the job. He'd incinerated the rest of Hawks' feathers and personally taken Hawks down. It had left the fire department with more work than expected is all. I should text Bernard, he notes, as he watches firemen dash across the parking lot. She can file excess destruction paperwork faster than anyone. Thankfully, when this takedown had been planned, the commission had transferred all of the valuable data to another building, so nothing of value was at risk. Most of the damage will be attributed to Dabi anyway, so Endeavor is not too worried about getting another reprimand. There is an ear-piercing, inhuman screech. You motherfuckers! Ng sighs. It sounds like Hawks has come to. He had hoped that strangling the bird would keep him unresponsive, at least until he was locked in a police vehicle. But apparently, he's more resilient than he appears. 2 police officers are attempting to drag Hawks to the other side of the parking lot. Ng places a lot of emphasis on the word attempting. Even without wings and in handcuffs, Hawks still has the power to nearly knock the officers off their feet. He writhes like a wild thing, hissing and spitting. With his new features, Endeavor could barely tell him apart from the mutant thugs he kept off the street. It was shocking, really, how different Hawks looked. He seemed to have gone out of his way to make himself look more like a villain, entirely distinct from the hero the public knew so well. His hair is interspersed with a crest of golden feathers, growing directly from his scalp. Inch-long black talons spring from his fingertips, and Ng now knows personally just how sharp they are. At some point, he went to the extent of sharpening his canines. And those feet, Ng represses a shudder. They're just grotesque. Hawk spots him as he is tugged by and dead stops. The officers nearly trip over themselves from the force. He turns to Ng, lifts his bound hands, and waves. And suddenly, it is like no time has passed at all. Oh, hey, Endeavor! Long time no see, he greets, still wearing the same dopey smile he'd had the day of the Hero Billboard charts. It distracts from the large hand-shaped bruises already forming around his throat. I'd love to catch up, but it seems my hands are tied. He flails again, nearly throwing one of the officers to the ground. Angie frowns at him. He's not about to indulge this childish display. I'm disappointed in you, Hawks. Well, that makes two of us. I was certain I could take down at least three of you. Manuel had passed out from blood loss. He was being rushed to the nearest hospital for an emergency transfusion. Crest was right alongside him. Hawks had managed to sneak one of his feathers behind their backs and slice his Achilles tendon. He had immediately fallen to the ground, immobilized by both pain and the injury, screaming like a man possessed. Paramedics weren't sure he would be able to walk again. The fact Hawks had believed himself capable of doing worse was arrogant at best and disturbing otherwise. Endeavor and Gran Torino had fared better, but hadn't gotten out unscathed. Gran Torino's nose was most likely broken, and Angie was going to have scars on his shoulders from where Hawks had been clawing at him. He could have just been struggling as Angie choked him out, instinctively fighting to remain conscious, but it almost seemed like he'd been going for the throat. I have nothing to say to you. But I have something to say to you. He beckons him closer with his head. Come here, I have a secret to tell you. Angie scowled, but Hawks just laughed at him. Oh, come on. I know I made you curious. He waggled his eyebrows, and for a moment, Angie was back in the restaurant before the attack by Kaiinbed. He had been confused that day, both with his fans' reaction to his attempted autograph and Shoto's continued rebellion or refusal to cooperate. Hawks had seemed like a godsend. He had the highest consistent approval rating of any hero other than All Might. And furthermore, he was the only person who actually believed Engie when he said he was going to do more. As annoying as Hawks had been, he had enjoyed that confidence, that positive regard. They had fought together, had nearly died together, and for a moment, he had almost seen Hawks as a friend. So maybe that is the reason he walks up to Hawks. Ignores the warnings of the police officers when Hawks urges him closer. Hawks' secrets have only helped him before, so he trusts them now. He leans forward and tilts his ear to Hawks. They are so close he can feel his goatee brush against his earlobe. Hawks hisses the words so quietly, Angie barely hears them. I know what you did to Toya. His stomach roils. He jerks back, shoves Hawks away from him. Toya was a tragedy, an unavoidable accident. How Hawks knew anything about his oldest son was a privacy breach of the highest order. How do you know that name? He shouts. The air around him ripples with heat as his rage skyrockets. The flames on his costume flare. Hawks throws his head back and cackles. Oh, the look on your face! It's better than I imagined! He cheers, laughing so hard the officers have to support most of his weight. Despite his smile, their eyes meet and Endeavor feels a shiver down his spine. He hasn't seen hatred like that since. How do you know that name? He repeats. He isn't leaving here without an answer. If Natsu has been talking to the press, Endeavor is going to have words with him. This matter had been settled years ago. There was no need to continually dredge it up. Hawks flutters his eyelashes at him. Oh, come on. Do I seem like the guy to kiss and tell? I don't have time for this. He reaches forward, grabs Hawks by the chin, and forces him to look Engie in the face. His skin sizzles, but Hawks doesn't so much as flinch. What do you know? The levity leaves Hawks' face. He looks at Engie with only that fathomless, swelling hatred. Is this how you got him to listen to you too? Hawks pulls his hand away, as though he was the one burned. His chin has shiny pink marks in the shape of Engie's fingers. They're starting to blister. That's what I thought. He grins again, but not the congenial smile he'd given him moments ago. This is wide and wild. This is a smile where the point is to show your teeth. The fervor reminds him of images he'd seen of Stain and Shigaraki. The smile of a fanatic. That's why, no matter how hard you try, no matter what pathetic excuses you give yourself about trying to be better, you'll never be a hero. Engie takes a step back. It's not a conscious decision. He isn't even certain why he does it. He isn't afraid of Hawks, of all people. Whatever the reason, Hawks finds it amusing. He smirks, golden eyes dancing with malice. Officers, I think that's your cue to take me away. The police seem unsure, but Hawks has stopped trying to break out of their hold. He goes willingly as they lead him away. Angie watches as they shove Hawks into the back of the police van, and he is gone from sight. He feels as though he has missed something. Though what? He can't say. Chapter 3. The President. Last night, for the first time in months, the president of the Hero Public Safety Commission got a full night of sleep. With her biggest hindrance finally under control, rest once again came easy. There were no 2 a.m. whiskeys downed in an attempt to cure her insomnia. There were no stress migraines chipping away at her temples. No all-nighters poring over a press statement, trying to find another way to justify how this happened. She had gone home, gone to bed, and slept a full 8 hours. Perhaps that's the reason she's in such a good mood today. Though, given the smirk that creeps onto her face as she enters Hawks' cell, she does not believe it to be the only reason. She is happy to see him. For a moment, she catches a sliver of surprise on his face, as though he really hadn't expected her to show up in person. Then he grins. It's the grin they carved into him with hours of dedicated sessions, like he can fool her with the very tools she gave him. Like she cannot see him wince when her heels clack closer against the cold concrete. Despite being handcuffed to a chair and flanked by 2 guards, he still dares give as much of a bow as possible. Madam President, he trills. She sighs and looks down on him. Oh, Kei-chan, what are we going to do with you? She tuts, and his cheeks flare red. She cannot remember the last time she had seen Hawks embarrassed, but she still remembers what it looks like. His crest ruffles, and he squirms before catching himself. Didn't think I was allowed to answer to that anymore. He is all tightly wound anger and forced casualness. Believe you said it was no longer my place. He mimics her voice, a high and snooty mockery. Well, Hawks certainly doesn't fit, she counters. You aren't a hero anymore. She looks him up and down. Though his hair and feathers are gray with ash, she can still easily tell his crest has been grown and groomed with care. The longest feathers are nearly 5 inches long, meaning he hasn't plucked them since he left. His talons are pointed, black, and clearly haven't been near clippers. Endeavor had burnt most of the feathers off his back, so she can't tell personally, but the attack team had reported that he'd grown out his tail. His feet are just atrocious, proportions so grotesque as to make her nauseous. The claws are twice as long as the ones on his hands, and given how thick and scaled the skin is, he has been foregoing shoes. Years of treatments wasted. Even more surprising is the work he's done on his teeth. Her eyes narrow. You've regrown your fangs. He smiles wider. The movie star teeth they'd spent so much time and money giving him once again resembles a predator's sneer. It's as though they were never filed down. It's amazing what regeneration quirks can do, huh? Dabi knows a guy who knows a guy. She hums. I suppose there are benefits to whoring yourself out to the second in command of the League of Villains. His grin fractures. A faulty reflection in a broken mirror. You don't know what you're talking about. Oh? Seems I've breached a sensitive subject. Don't tell me you think you've actually convinced yourself he loves you. He hesitates, and she pounces. You poor thing, she tells him, voice laced with pity. You really did. She tisks and steps forward. We never should have assigned you to that mission. It was careless of us. Considering your parentage, it's no surprise you got confused. My asshole parents have nothing to do with Dabi. It makes sense, she continues as though he hasn't spoken. Victims of child abuse are more likely to seek out abusive partners in the future. She reaches out slowly and strokes his hair. He stiffens initially, but does not pull away. Despite his reservations, he cannot help but relax at the full preening. He used to beg for this for hours, when he first came to stay with them. Now that she has finally given it to him, he doesn't seem able to quite understand what is happening. We failed you, Kei-chan, she soothes. He lets out a small, quiet croon, and she is not sure he even realizes it was out loud. But we can start over. You'll be a great underground hero if you just come back to us. She moves her hand to Hawks' cheek. As he always had as a child, he leans into her touch. He was always so desperate for affirmation, so desperate to be loved. Where others would be bribed with power or money, Hawks was swayed with a hug. She hadn't indulged him in quite some time. Sure, he had outgrown this childish craving, an oversight on her part. Spare the rod and spoil the child, yes, but refuse his wants and he will search for them elsewhere. Perhaps this is for the best, she thinks. He had so much spirit before. It was time to remake him anyway. He's much more deadly in the form. He will serve as an assassin. She can work with this. They had trained Hawks to be fast. His wings were deadly, yes, and versatile. But his true strength has always lied with his speed. From the first time she had heard of him, that small boy who had flown into an inevitable car crash, she knew he would be different. He would be better. He would be too fast for his own good. So she doesn't have time to react when he lashes out and bites her hand. Sharpened canines shred through her flesh like butter, sending white-hot pain up through her forearm. Before she can even think about it, she screams in agony. She's not entirely sure what happens after that. The guards swarm around her. They tug on Hawks' jaw, shout at him to let go. Still, he clings on, and her hand howls. Eventually, they get him to let go. She isn't sure how they did it, and in all honesty, she doesn't care. The moment she can, she tears away from him. For a moment they stand there, the guards, herself, Hawks, all of them panting. None of them quite believe what just happened. Hawks spits her blood onto the floor. It trickles down his chin, and his snarl is streaked with crimson. Go fuck yourself. She takes a deep breath through her nose and applies pressure to her bleeding hand. One of the guards moves forward, arm already raised to strike him, but she signals him to stop. She has a much more fitting punishment for him. She levels him with her most disappointed glare, and hides her pleasure when he ducks his head. He never did like underperforming. I was willing to ignore your more uncouth appearance, she huffs. But it seems you need a reminder about what is appropriate. Which means no unsightly feathers. Your talons will be trimmed, and you're going to wear your old boots. What? He squawks, as though that will change her mind. You must have known something like this would happen. Your mutations may have won you favors with the League, but they will not have a place in civilized society. There is nothing wrong with me. Okay, Chan. Of course there is. He reels as though she has slapped him, as though the answer wasn't obvious. You honestly believe you would ever gotten to be the number 2 hero looking like you do now? Don't be silly. It doesn't matter how talented you are, or how many people you save. You think Gang Orca continually gets knocked out of the top 10 because he spends too much time giving aquarium tours to needy children? Or because he's ranked 3rd in heroes that look like villains? Hawks doesn't answer her. You never would have gotten where you are without the choices we made for you, she continues. And so, you will agree when we are so gracious as to fix you again. Am I understood? No, he growls. He tries to sound angry, but his voice shakes. I love my mutant traits. I do. She doesn't believe it. She doesn't think he does either. Maybe in a week you will be willing to see reason, she says, cloaking her voice with forlorn. If you behave, we will discuss this again. Maybe we can work something out. But for now, it's for your own good. She shakes her head. I really am sorry. I didn't want to do this. She turns and looks at the guards. Put on the blindfold. She does not look back, as Hawk shrieks and curses at her. Not when flesh slaps against flesh. Not when the guards grunt with exertion. Not when Hawks tries to stifle a whimper. It is not what he needs. The carrot and the stick, she thinks to herself as she leaves the room. The carrot and the stick. Chapter 4. An Announcement. Amy. The funny thing is, Amy doesn't remember what they were going to watch. It was something she had been excited for. She knew that. Their schedules had coincided, and they both had the afternoon off. She remembers Koharu teasing her for her excitement, reaching out to stroke Amy's hair as it flooded a fluorescent fuchsia. She'd always hated the way her quirk reflected her emotions, stripped her of any emotional privacy. Most people figured out the colors of her moods and made assumptions or wouldn't listen when she tried telling them how she felt. Not Koharu. She remembered how her hair, previously a sunny yellow, had tinted pale pink when she'd first seen Koharu's face. That pink had gotten more and more prominent as they'd gotten to know each other, but Koharu had never confronted her about her crush, never asked what the color meant. Amy had asked once, after they were married, why Koharu had never asked her about her quirk. It was one of the few times she managed to make Koharu blush. People tend to get upset when I guess their emotions based on their heartbeat, she admitted, as though she'd been caught spying. I figured if you wanted me to know, you'd tell me. I wanted it to be your choice. And Amy had fallen in love with her all over again. These days, her hair was not as volatile as it had once been, always tending towards what she now called Koharu pink. Still, sometimes, when she felt them strongly enough, other colors would peek through, hence the fuchsia. She must have been so excited. But now, as the emergency alert blares on the TV and Daikaku Miyagi appears on the screen, she feels only terror. We interrupt this program to bring you a special announcement. Former pro hero and current member of the League of Villains, Hawks, was brought into police custody late last night. Out of the corner of her eye, the color drains from her hair, leaving it a pale, hueless gray. Behind her, something shatters. Koharu had been making tea for the both of them. The mugs now lie in fragments at her feet, only good for archaeologists and the trash bin. The brown liquid rushes over the grooves of the tiles and races for the soles of her feet. Amy can see steam rising off of it. She shouts when it reaches her wife's unprotected feet, but Koharu doesn't. In fact, Koharu doesn't seem to notice much of anything. Her eyes are locked on the TV screen. There's a picture of Hawks, an old one, from his hero days. His friendly smile contrasts with Miyagi's grave expression. A team of heroes intercept the Hawks during a terrorist attack on the National Quirk Registry. Emi jumps to her feet and runs over to Koharu. She grabs her hands and physically pulls her away from the spill, careful to avoid the broken ceramic. The report continues, though Amy is no longer paying attention. None of that matters in comparison to Koharu. She gently forces Koharu to sit down on the couch. She kneels in front of her. Koharu is muttering something, repeating the same words over and over, but she can't make them out. Amy isn't stupid. She knows something happened between Hawks and Koharu. Even if the HPSC themselves hadn't called for an in-person interview, Amy would still have figured out that much. Koharu always says she never wanted to be a hero, but she gravitated to hopeless cases. And the look on her face when she saw Hawks on the news. It's the same look she gave to the half-starved cat she'd found in the alley outside of their apartment building. More than anything, she wants to help. So Amy ignores the TV. Instead, she pulls her wife into her lap and holds her as she cries over the arrest of public enemy number 1. Tokoyami. Tokoyami can hear the clamor before he gets to the common room. Turn it off, he was right behind me. I can't find the remote. He sighs and braces himself. Maybe he won't notice. You've got to be fucking kidding. Tokoyami enters, and is not surprised to see the face of his former mentor on the TV. With known villain Dabi, allegedly attempted to burn down the building with the staff inside. Tokoyami! That's Midoriya. He stands closest to Tokoyami, while the rest of the class stand like sentinels behind him. Sero and Kaminari frantically throw couch cushions into the ether in their quest for a remote. We were... He is unable to finish the sentence. He just looks at Tokoyami, gaze wide and hollow. Most of the others do the same, with worn expressions of pity and horror. They have seen the darkness that infected Tokoyami's life and shied away from it. They do not seem able to comprehend how he stands with its weights on his shoulders. Thankfully, the heroes, led by number 1 hero Endeavor, manage to arrest Hawks and minimize damage to the building. Tokoyami winces. Aizawa warned him of Hawks' capture and the coming upheaval the announcement would bring. Tokoyami had insisted he could still attend classes, especially now that he had been forewarned. Yet, as the reporter speaks, Tokoyami feels a chill in his spine, as though someone walked over his grave. Thank you, he says, and gazes only at the floor. I appreciate your concern, but I am fine. I swear it. He turns, prepared to spend the rest of the evening alone in his room. Tokoyami, wait! Midoriya starts to follow, but someone must have held him back. He is alone as he walks to the elevator. Even as he departs, the report rings clear. No civilians were harmed, but two heroes were taken to the hospital in critical condition. His stomach curdles, and he can feel dark shadows settle heavy in his chest. He knew Hawks. Though the hero claimed to be too fast for anyone to follow, Tokuyami had managed to stay by his side. He had seen the deadly acts Hawks could commit, but it had always been against villains. Two heroes in critical condition. The elevator opens, and he goes to his room in a daze. Surely, this cannot be so black and white. He recalls a day, one that feels so long ago, when he had gone after a group of violent personages with Hawks. Tokoyami and Dark Shadow had cornered one, while Hawks had restrained the other three. There was only one injury. Hawks had shot a feather through the hand of one of the dastardly crew. Tokoyami had not really made anything of it at the time. The man had been striking out with his quirk, aimed a deadly gas at Hawks himself. The feather seemed a benign move in recompense, but Tokoyami could not forget the pensive look on Hawks' face as the man was led away. Tokoyami, he said, with no trace of his typical sun-filled smile. His voice was as serious as the coming twilight. If a fight ever gets to the point where you have to hurt someone, you have already lost. Tokoyami took the words to heart, but not necessarily literally. It wasn't until he was filing reports, until he saw that Hawks had an injury during a rest rate of only 3.7, that he realized Hawks had meant every word. He ponders what magnitude of fight could lead Hawks to putting two people in the hospital. He then reels in self-loathing. Tokoyami throws himself onto his bed. His thoughts are unbecoming of a hero. The amount of times he had considered the ways Hawks could be found innocent. It's humiliating. Fumikage, Tokoyami wants to rip his feathers out. He was so distracted by the bulletin, he had forgotten to open the curtains. Dark Shadow was here. So he suggested the same plan he had every day since Hawks disappeared, the one Tokoyami refused to accept as being his own. If we looked, we could... Tokoyami glares at him. If Hawks wished to be found, we would have found him. Despite the gloom of his dorm, Dark Shadow cowers. But if we... I'm growing wary of this conversation. Tokoyami snaps, harsher than yesterday, or the days before. Today especially, Hawks' absence grates against his soul. It is not Dark Shadow's fault, but there is no other receptile for his frustration. Do not ask me about this again. Dark Shadow whimpers, but retreats, leaving Tokoyami alone in the dark. He sighs and lays back, and rubs his hands over his face. There's a knock on his door. He lets out a raspy warning bark before he can even think about it. His feathers ruffle in agitation. Tokoyami. Shoji. His feathers relax immediately. There is one person he can bear sharing space with right now. Come in. Shoji enters and quietly shuts the door behind him. He says nothing, only sits on the bed next to Tokoyami's head and leans against the wall. They sit there for a long time, until the awful darkness in Tokoyami's chest no longer feels so stifling. He sits up, moving so that he and Shoji sit side by side. I expected Midoriya to be the one to follow me. He tried. I managed to convince him not to. Tokoyami chuckles. You have my thanks. It is quiet, but he can feel the tension building between them. He sighs and waits for Shoji to ask. It's okay to be upset, you know. Tokoyami blinks. That is not what he expected. Yes, I know. He betrayed my trust, and for that... No, he interrupts, shaking his head. One of his right mouths stretches closer and rests against Tokoyami's wrist. The touch is a small comfort, but a welcome one. It is okay to be upset he was caught. Tokoyami chirps in surprise. He can feel Dark Shadow whine from within him. Perhaps Midoriya would have been a more preferable choice, Tokoyami thinks. He would not have read me so well. He is about to deny it. There is no justice in his line of thinking, nothing heroic in his doubts. He will move beyond this, because he must. I am. What? Though his face is looking away, Tokoyami can tell the two eyes on Shoji's arms were carefully documenting his reaction. No one really knows what happened to Hawks, he says. His words are careful and precise, the way Shoji is in all things. But he suddenly appeared as a villain with mutant traits. It leads to a lot of speculation. Tokoyami remembers the gloves Hawks never took off, the enormous boots he'd wear even in the evening when he began to limp. He'd remembered how he'd interpreted any cries Tokoyami made, distinguishing between greeting and warning with fluent ease. He remembered the way Hawks had always ruffled his feathers when they were alone, and sometimes it almost felt like preening. But mostly, he remembered how he effortlessly dodged all of Tokoyami's questions about them. He nods, throat suddenly very tight. And then some of the things they've done. The takedown of the CRC, the release of documents showing banks' refusals to loan to businesses helping those with heteromorphic quirks. Even now, the quirk registry. All four of Shoji's eyes meet his. Did you ever have to? Yes. Tokoyami does not wish to talk about those appointments. Doubts Shoji does either. He can feel Dark Shadow prickling with rage at the very thought. You don't think it's a matter of chance? Shoji hums and thinks for a moment. I think people like us have never had such a clear symbol of hope before. In a flicker of movement, one of his hands stretches up as though to reach for his mask, but stops. Things feel different, is all. For a moment, they sit on his bed in silence. Tokoyami turns and places a hand on Shoji's wrist. You know, you need not wear your mask around me. Shoji startles at his words. Are you sure? It's not a pretty sight. Tokoyami huffs. You remember what happened at the summer training camp. You have seen me far more monstrous than you could ever be. He reaches up, places his hands on either side of the mask. His fingers perch along its hem. May I? Slowly, Shoji nods, and Tokoyami pulls his mask down to the rest around his neck. Shoji's mouth is a long, jagged thing. It is nearly a snout, no real human lips, more flaps like the jowls of a hound. His teeth are pointed and uneven, a far cry from the perfect straight teeth that appeared on his manifested mouths. Tokoyami idly wonders if that had taken extra practice. His cheeks are delightfully pink. Tokoyami can't help but gaze at him. Shoji grimaces, mistaking Tokoyami's silence for rejection. Like I said, it's a lot. He reaches up, hurrying to put his mask back on, but Tokoyami catches his hands. No. He recalls the way it felt when he first saw Hawks, the villain, flying through the air, features on display, an act of rebellion. He'd wanted to fly with him, with no question or doubt. For the briefest instant, he had been certain of his path. Looking at Shoji without his mask, it feels like that. You are a light in the darkness. Toga. The president of the Hero Public Safety Commission released a statement saying, Today is a great day for both the heroic profession and Japan as a whole. Knuckles flash white around the whetstone. She gripped so tightly her hands began to tremble. Hawks' actions left all of us, heroes and civilians alike, in a state of shock. Toga is sharpening one of her knives. The motion is as familiar as her own heartbeat. The blade is crimson. The handle is black, accented with gold. I knew I had to get it for you. Now we match. She grimaces. She is going to drench the commission in blood. Today, thanks to the new symbol of peace, we have taken back the security he stole from us. Today, we begin to rebuild and recover. You're just going to sit there? For the first time since the League has come together, Spinner is shouting at Tomura. His clothes are out, and he has already hissed at their boss twice since the news report came on. If they're announcing his arrest, it means they're already certain we can't get to him. We need to move. Tomura takes a deep breath. He doesn't move from holding his cell phone to his ear, but his hand shakes from how tightly he is gripping his phone. Toga can almost hear him counting backwards from 10. Spinner, I know that. Why the fuck else would I be on the fucking phone? Dabi is still at large. If you have any information regarding his whereabouts, please, and someone turn that shit off before I disintegrate the TV myself. Compress hurries to do so, probably happy to get away from the flaring tempers. Spinner's head bobs and his tail whips wildly. The skin under his chin extends, something Toga has only seen happen twice, and both times directed at an enemy. It's times like these Toga most misses Kurogiri. There is no one better at talking down a fight. And if that didn't work, he could, and would, teleport them to opposite sides of the base. Hawks had been the one to pick up the slack, but... She sharpens her knife. You don't understand, Spinner growls. You don't know what they'll do to him, what they do to people like us. Do you think I'm stupid? Shigaraki snaps. That I don't want to free one of our most powerful player characters? That I'm not. He cuts himself off and grits his teeth. He reaches his free hand up to his neck. The scratching of his nails against his skin scrapes like dead leaves. We don't have Kurogiri. Even if we did, we don't know where he is. So what exactly do you expect? Guys, I have a lead. What's going on? Twice dashes into the room, wearing only his pajamas and his mask. His socked feet nearly slip out from under him, and he clings to the couch to stay upright. Twice. A grand entrance as always. Mr. Compress cheers, and Toga giggles. She doesn't think she'd ever seen him so excited to see Twice. Please, immediately, tell us whatever inane thing you focused on. What the hell are you talking about? I have a way to find Hawks. Spinner whistles with joy, and Shigaraki drops his phone. You've got to be fucking kidding me. Shiggy, I'm not, really. Twice pulls himself upright. He looks at each of them without ever settling his gaze, like he can't figure out who to break the news to. Remember that thing Hawks told us when he first met you? That really sensitive thing? He wouldn't stop whining about it. Spinner and Compress both look to Shigaraki for confirmation, but he does not answer. Instead, he becomes still as stone. The weight of it blankets the entire room. He nods once. Toga remembers too. When I was 8, they started giving me training to resist torture. Her hands tighten around the handle of her knife. I had Giran keep tabs on the guy in charge of it. His name's Isao Igarashi. Sounds like a real asshole. He retired some years back, but was contacted about potentially consulting on an old case of his. A tight band squeezes around Toga's throat. Suddenly, she can hear her heartbeat in her ears. Her face and hands burn. She wants to kill. Absolutely not! She snarls, brandishing her knife. Where is he? Shigaraki holds up a finger to her, telling her to wait. It's a barely concealed slight. She'd stab him for that any other day, if it wasn't for the frightening calm that settled on his face. It reminds Toga of the day he told them about the plans for the Shihei Sakai. Serious as death, and just as all-encompassing. How long do we have? A little more than a week. Bastard said he'd only help as a last resort. Shigaraki hums. That's how long we have to enact a plan to infiltrate the commission. Bonus. So everyone clear on their roles? She gave Shigaraki a giddy nod, already excited for their upcoming plans. Good. And remember, Shigaraki continues, no one tells Dabi about this, or he'll... Don't tell me what. Dabi hobbles into the room. He shouldn't even be putting weight on his ankle yet, much less be walking without assistance. The makeshift splint she and Twice had constructed was charred around the edges, as though his anger itself was trying to melt the injury away. To be honest, even if he hadn't been down a leg, Dabi doesn't look like he should be standing. His eyes are bloodshot and there are fresh burns up and down his arms. Apparently, Dabi had been radiating heat like crazy. Twice and Compress had both evacuated their rooms, saying he made the hallway too hot to bear. Toga is pretty sure he hasn't even realized he's doing it. Nothing. I figured out a way to rescue Hawks. Dabi sucks in a breath, and Toga can tell nothing on this earth will stop him from following them. It's so romantic, and she can't help but coo. Love is cute on Dabi. Tomura moans and cradles his head, very carefully, in his hands. God damn it. Chapter 5. Eraserhead. Aizawa knew the situation he was walking into. The commission had briefed him for over an hour on all the details leading up to this interrogation, made him memorize every last classified secret. And honestly, most of it wasn't surprising. Aizawa could have guessed. He'd seen the news reports, a red blur that went shooting across the sky, instantly restraining law enforcement and small-time heroes. He'd seen the close-ups, the claws, the tail, the teeth. He had known the extreme measures necessary. Still, it unnerves him more than he expected to see Hawks blindfolded and trapped in his chair by a straitjacket. A chrome muzzle rests over his jaw. It wouldn't stop him from talking, but kept him from lashing out and biting. Aizawa had seen similar models before, on dangerous criminals. Mutants who bared their teeth, fire breathers and acid spitters, any villain whose quirk was activated with their voice. It's not the same. It's not. Perhaps the most jarring thing is seeing Hawks without his feathers. Hawks was known for his wings. There were few hero symbols more iconic. They were large, too, bigger and livelier in person than any picture could capture. Their mere presence demanded the attention of the room. But now, Aizawa can see nothing of the sort. Whoever detained Hawks had managed to strip away any trace to his quirk, leaving not even the stumps of his wings visible. Without the additional bulk, Hawks seemed smaller and thinner than Aizawa remembered. If he had a mind to, Aizawa could have snapped them in half. Hawks doesn't say anything when the door opens, merely tilts his head in Aizawa's direction. He sits calmly, with his head down. It's a far cry from the feral brainwashed creature his briefings described. Other than a slight quiver in his hand, Hawks is perfectly still. In the fluorescence, his skin looks like porcelain. Fragile. Hawks seems fragile. Aizawa steps toward him. His shoe squeals against the floor. Hawks' head snaps to him. Aizawa doesn't flinch, but his heart seizes. Hawks had always been quick, but Aizawa doesn't recall him ever moving like this. Even blindfolded, Hawks tracks him across the room. Again, Aizawa doesn't know why he was surprised. Fragile things tend to have sharp edges. Hawks, he greets, and the predatory facsimile fades so quickly, Aizawa is half certain he imagined it. Eraserhead, finally! He cheers. The muzzle flattens his words, like he has cotton in his cheeks. Aizawa raises an eyebrow. You've been expecting me? I mean, who else would have invited you? He seems amused, as though Aizawa had said the punchline to a joke he didn't remember telling. I told them you're the only person I'd speak to, despite their many attempts to convince me otherwise. The commission had failed to mention that. They were reluctant, of course, Hawks continues, unaware of Aizawa's momentary loss in balance. Or perhaps he just didn't care. Can't have the Hero Commission bending to the will of villains willy-nilly. But it turns out they want information more than they fear me. He shrugs. The locks in his jacket jingled. Not shocking. I tend to fall last in their list of priorities. Now, remove my blindfold and we can get started. You're an idiot if you think I'm gonna fall for that. Hawks groans. Even though he can't see it, Aizawa is certain he rolls his eyes. Come on. I'm in a straitjacket that's secured to a chair. My ankles are cuffed to the legs. They've destroyed all my feathers and put me in a fucking muzzle. You don't think it's a little overkill? And then, when Aizawa says nothing, please, his voice cracks. Aizawa had always hated Hawks' persona. He was a cocky and cavalier media darling, flaunting himself every moment he could. Everything about him reflected the size of hero society Aizawa hated. Hawks didn't say please, not like that. He didn't beg. That was someone else, the man he must have been before, or maybe the man he was becoming. Either way, it wasn't a man Aizawa had seen before. He undoes the blindfold. Hawks blinks up at him with dilated pupils, cocks your smile back in place. Aizawa doesn't comment on the tremble leaving his hand. Thanks, he says, all bravado once again. Couldn't have picked a better view to come back to. He winks, and Aizawa resists the urge to scold him like one of his students. Why am I here, Hawks? Well, that is one hell of a question, Eraser. Why are we here? Is it all part of some great cosmic plan, or... Hawks. Alright, give me a break. This is the first decent conversation I've had in... What day is it? Aizawa tells him the date. In nearly a week. You've been here a week? Aizawa says the words carefully. They feel like a bomb in his mouth. He squints at Hawks. He looks like shit, to be honest. Now that the blindfold is off, he can see he has a fresh black eye. At the moment, it's still fresh with reds and yellows, but Aizawa can tell it will bloom purple overnight. His hair is a hack job, like someone had gone at it with scissors. Aizawa can see clumps of dried blood where hair and feathers were ripped from his scalp. Most worrying are the still bleeding cuts carved into where the metal of the muzzle rubs against his face. The skin is raw and chafed, like someone had been trying to hold it steady as Hawks thrashed. He was sure the talking was only making it worse. Hawk smiles again, though this is miles from any sort of charm. Problem? Aizawa doesn't answer him. He isn't sure there's an answer at all. What do you want? He says instead. Hawks grins, his canines gleam. I have information for you. Aizawa raises an eyebrow and waits. Come on. I'm not just gonna tell you. I'm a villain now, remember? Good to know your time away from society hasn't made you any less insufferable. You've seen who I hang out with. If anything, I've gotten worse. What do you want? Aizawa crosses his arms. He wishes he had asked for a chair. Negotiations like these tended to take long hours and even more lawyers. If Hawks thinks he is going to get immunity, he has lost even more of his mind than Aizawa thought. Don't look so morose. I'm not gonna beg for my freedom or anything. Hawks taps his foot in boredom. Aizawa can hear the cuff jangling. I know I'm gonna die in Tartarus, or on the Commission's leash. He laughs. Aizawa doesn't. Nah, my game is much simpler than that. I'm gonna ask some questions, and all you gotta do is answer them. Aizawa can't entirely cut off his groan. You seriously are no fun. Come on! I'll even give you a freebie to start off. Aizawa braces himself, already debating the merits of granting classified information to a known villain. How's Tsukiyomi? Aizawa's jaw drops. What? Tsukiyomi, how is he doing? He's doing the best he can be, Aizawa says, because he can't think of a way Hawks would use this against him. Had he expected Tsukiyomi to give in? If so, Hawks had not been very observant during their first time together. He's stronger than most, though your situation left him disheartened. He has only been working harder. Hawks smiles at that, something bitter painting the edges. Yeah, that sounds like him, the little angel of darkness. Aizawa waits for him to elaborate, but instead, Hawks beams. It drives angry gouges into his cheeks. Sliding Go is a double agent. Aizawa chokes on nothing. What the fuck? That's my information. Do whatever you want with it. You're not getting anything else from this question. It puts a lot of pieces into place. Aizawa was on the fringes of numerous cases related to the League. Many of them had pointed to something big happening in Deka. But Sliding Go had rebuffed their every inquiry. Aizawa had thought him incompetent, but this made a frightening amount of sense. Help you out any? Hawks teases, probably already realizing how useful this has been already. If it checks out, sure. He stays measured, careful. Aizawa is swiftly realizing he is holding far fewer cards than he thought. The last thing he wants to do is give Hawks more. What else do you got? Okay, this one's for all the marbles, Eraser. Answer this one, and I'll tell you everything. Aizawa's eyes widened. What do you mean? It means exactly what I said. You get this one right, and I'll give you whatever you want. Scout's honor. His grin grows wider in anticipation. Aizawa is not impressed, and given Hawks' snort, it shows on his face. Come on, it's an easy one. Hawks is still smiling, but that predatory glint is back. What's my name? Aizawa is not afraid to admit it. He scoffs. They aren't all like Hawks or Endeavor. Aizawa makes it a point to learn the names of all the pro heroes he works with. If Hawks is hoping to prove something, that is not the way to do it. He opens his mouth and then closes it. What is his name? Aizawa must have known it at some point. He racks his brain, trying to remember every moment of their first interaction, visualizing so intently his temples ache. He remembers Hawks, eager and bothersome, far too cocky for his age. He remembers the mission, a drug ring, who hired runners with speed quirks, but not the kid's name. Surely he must have heard it. There's a snicker, and it brings him back to the holding cell. Hawks is giving him an exaggerated pout. Aww. And here I thought we were friends, Shota-kun. Normally, Aizawa would be pissed, but he has no leg to stand on. How on earth does he not know the name of the former number 2 hero? When he looks at him, his hero alias is the only word that comes to mind. There's only Hawks. Has Aizawa even seen him in civilian attire? The only image he can conjure are from commercials and billboard ads, and of course, his most recent appearances. Aizawa swallows down the bile that builds up in his throat. His mouth is slimy with his own self-disgust. Hawks tisks. Don't beat yourself up, Aizawa. He rolls his head, cracking his neck with obtrusive pops, before asking the same question Aizawa can't stop thinking. Though, I have to wonder, why don't you know it? Though judging by his smirk, Hawks already has the answer. What the hell is going on? Okay, last one. For the first time, Hawks softens. There's no smile, no carnivorous sneer. He just looks at Eraserhead like he wants to see directly through him. Do you care about your students, Aizawa? The question is innocent enough, but it still makes him falter. Dabi had asked him something similar once, at the summer training camp so long ago. But this time there is no underlying threat, no fire in the air, no distant screams he was too far to aid. Hawks is merely looking at him, the same way he had when he first came in. No smile, no charisma, no flair, just focused eyes and a curious air. And hell, it's not like the league doesn't already know. More than anything. Hawks hums and nods. He gives a small smile, more real than anything Aizawa has seen on him. There's a safe house in an apartment building a block from UA. It's on one of the higher floors, with a clear view onto the school grounds. Shigaraki usually sends Toga to pose as a resident and gather recon. You're gonna want to have that cleared out. Aizawa writes down the name of the building and the apartment number. He is already considering which heroes are going to be best suited for this mission. Still, there is something bothering him. Why tell me this? Hawk shrugs. That's an answer you're going to have to figure out for yourself. I'm not giving you anything else. He settles back in the chair and nods to the blindfold resting in Aizawa's pocket. You should put that back on. The commission will get pissed otherwise. No, I don't think I will. Hawks lets out a winded breath, his whole form compounding on itself. If you say so, he quips, but Aizawa hears the gratitude. He nods and turns to go. And Aizawa? He stops and glances back. Find my name. And when you do, look up your students. There are things you'll want to see. Aizawa nods and pauses a moment. The idea of leaving the room makes his hair stand on end. Something more is going on here. He looks back at Hawks, and for a moment he sees Eri, all strapped down and bandaged up. Then it's Hawks again, locked in a straitjacket and muzzled. The feeling in his chest doesn't change. The former hero lets out a soft, mournful key. He looks at Aizawa with something like pity. Go help someone who can actually be saved. Aizawa scours the internet for hours after his meeting with Hawks. He reads everything from journal articles to conspiracy forums. Not a single one of them gives any confirmation of Hawks' real name. So instead, he looks up news reports from Hawks' debut. The teenager waves to the crowd, beaming, as the police shoved armed robbers into the backs of vans. His cheeks are round with baby fat, but his forehead is wrinkled from frowning. He was the same age as Tokoyami, as Midoriya, as his eyes burn from reading. He should get his eye drops. Instead, he rubs his temples to stave off a coming migraine. Fuck. He tells the empty kitchen. It says nothing back. A key scrapes against the front door. Hisashi enters, humming a cheery tune. His hair is down, drifting over his shoulders, and headphones hang loose around his neck. Aizawa glances at the clock. 4 a.m. Hisashi's radio show had ended nearly an hour ago. He had meant to go to bed before his husband got home, but clearly he had lost track of time. Oh well. It wouldn't be the first time he'd been awake to welcome Hisashi home. He stands, and Hisashi jumps at the movement. Oh shit, Shota, you scared me. He chuckles, and it sounds like a fresh pot of coffee. Warm, inviting, and everything he needs to keep going. Hisashi notes the wealth of notes and data pads he has spread across the kitchen table and fondly shakes his head. Burning the midnight oil. Have you even eaten anything besides jelly pouches today? Normally Aizawa would snipe back. They tease and talk and trail after each other to bed. But tonight, Aizawa walks over to him and wraps his arms around him. Hisashi hugs him back, arms enveloping him before he can even express his concern. "Are you okay? Are the kids alright?" "They're fine," Aizawa reassures him. Aries in bed, and Hitoshi went up to his dorm hours ago. "Then what's going on?" And Aizawa will tell him. Later, in their bed, with the cat on his lap, Aizawa will tell Hisashi about his meeting with Hawks. He will tell him about the signs of torture, the questions, the look of unwavering resignation Hawks had as Aizawa left. But for now, he brushes a strand of lengthy blonde hair behind his husband's ear, anchoring himself in the contact. He presses his lips against the straight scar over his right cheekbone, and then another its twin on the left. He traces them with his thumbs, following them up to Hisashi's ears. He refuses to think of the matching scars on Hitoshi's face, or the furious red lines on Hawks's. Instead, he pulls Hisashi close and tries to figure out how to tell his husband he didn't stop it. Chapter 6. Isao Igarashi. Isao Igarashi walks around his neighborhood nearly every day. It is part of a calming routine that settled into his retirement like a bear preparing for winter. Each morning, he gets up, makes himself steamed rice with a fried egg, and gives Nori her breakfast. He checks the news on his datapad until Nori starts getting antsy and spins in circles near the door. He puts her on her leash, and they take the elevator to the lobby of his apartment building. Today, the wind buffets against him as he exits the front door, and he buttons up his sweater. Nori barks at a twirling leaf as it tumbled past. The sight makes him chuckle, and though he clings to that brief joy, his mind cannot help but turn to darker things. Igarashi isn't a good person. He isn't a good person, and that is something he knows very intimately about himself. He has done atrocious, unforgivable things, and he goes to bed every night knowing people he'd hurt were out there in the world, scarred in a way he could not take back. Igarashi is not a good person, but he has done great things, so he reconciles himself with that. Still, some nights they haunt him. The elderly man who had died of a heart attack during one of their sessions, the pregnant woman who had refused to turn against her husband, the little boy with red wings that flapped in a panic as though he could fly away. He hears their screams in his nightmares, but everything he has done for the good of humanity. That is enough. It is the reason that, even though he had long retired, he has agreed to return to the HPSC when they called him. He had been given this quirk. It is his job to do good with it. The commission had given him that opportunity, and it was his duty. Every time he doubts, he remembers the medals and the accolades and the cases he helped solve. Surely it all has to mean something. He's older now, no longer familiar with the dangerous world of heroes and villains. Maybe in his heyday he would have clocked the teenage girl in the alley as a threat. Maybe he would have noticed the knife she's holding behind her back. Maybe he would have seen the hatred behind her smile. But today, he doesn't. He's been out of the game long enough that his commission job feels like a distant planet, still in the same universe, but completely out of reach. It's like a meteor strike when she reaches out and snatches him by the collar. In one fluid movement, he is pressed against the wall of the laundromat. His head cracks against the concrete in an explosion of stars. He has a knife against his throat, but her grin is far sharper. He didn't recognize her at first, but a group of more conspicuous men join her from deeper down the alley, and he puts the pieces together. This is Himiko Toga, from the League of Villains. Nori, the lovable fool that she is, yaps playfully and jumps at the serial killer's ankle. She whines for attention, and Igarashi hopes beyond all hope that she does not get it. "Oh, look at this little star!" A man in a black ski mask cheers as he crouches down. "Come here, beautiful." Nori is instantly persuaded. She scrambles around the girl's legs and bolts to his hand. The moment he pets her, she disappears in a blue marble, leash and all. "Don't!" He leans forward, as though that could stop them, but the knife bites further into his skin. "I think you have bigger things to worry about," she hisses, and when he looks back at her, he notices something that hollows out his chest. Toga is wearing thick gloves that reach up to her elbows. A jacket covers her shoulders. She's wearing thick leggings and she has a scarf around her neck. Both her compatriots, the one who stole Nori and a man in a skin-tight bodysuit, are covered head to toe as well. There is no skin for him to touch. Nowhere he can activate his quirk. That means this isn't coincidence. They are after him specifically. Breathing becomes more difficult, and he has to fight to stay upright. The world spins. They talk, but the dialogue passes around him in haze. Twice? Is this him? No way, never seen him before. Excellent, now we just... Wait. This voice, raspy like chimney smoke, comes from behind the group surrounding him. A man Igarashi hadn't noticed pushes off the wall he'd been resting on. He too is in gloves and long sleeves. The extra clothing covers most of his trademark scars, but Igarashi recognizes his face easily. Dabi. He walks forward, limping slightly. The other men part so Dabi can approach, and his glare burns. He is studying Igarashi like he can't decide the best way to kill him. The heat radiating off him makes the air ripple like a mirage, and Igarashi starts to sweat. He gestures for Toga to move, and she does, allowing them to stand toe to toe. Igarashi suddenly, irrationally, misses the knife. Dabi speaks. Use your quirk on me. What? His voice is practically a whimper. Is this a trick? Are you deaf or just stupid? He takes off one of his gloves. He offers his unblemished fingers, where Igarashi's quirk will work best. I don't... The words won't come, but he can't stop fumbling for them. Do it, or I'll incinerate your hands. Igarashi looks at the others. Surely they won't let him. They must need him for something, to commit some heinous act of torture. If they didn't need his quirk, he would be dead already. He waits, frantically hoping one of them will do something to stop him, but none of them do. Toga giggles and licks his blood off her knife. He reaches out a shaky, wrinkled hand that still looks healthier than Dabi's, and activates his quirk. His fingers tingle as the pain receptors in Dabi's hands glow fluorescent yellow. Dabi immediately hunches over and clenches his jaw to muffle a scream. A distant part of Igarashi is impressed. No one has ever handled his quirk this well before. At least, not at first. He stops, unsure what his next move should be. Dabi doesn't move for a moment, only wiggles his fingers to make sure they are all intact. Everyone is still. The other villains are tense, as though waiting for the word to attack. Toga isn't smiling anymore. What did it feel like? Dabi chuckles at the temperature of liquid nitrogen. It feels like burning alive. He looks up at Igarashi, and for a moment, he is certain he is going to be burnt alive anyway. Instead, Dabi does something much worse. Tell me, when they were screaming, did you enjoy it? It's like the air is punched out of his chest. What? No, of course not. Dabi laughs. Really expect me to believe that? You worked as a professional torturer for over 40 years, and I'm supposed to think you don't get off on it? I did what I had to do. The commission. Did the commission hold a gun to your head? Dabi sneers. He towers over Igarashi, caging him against the wall. Was there any point you couldn't have left? Igarashi has no answer. It only seems to make Dabi angrier. He grabs Igarashi's shirt collar, singeing it. The heat is unbearable now. So hot he can barely keep his eyes open. Please let me go, he pleads. Given in already? Dabi cackles with sadistic glee. Another question first. Did you ever let them go? Sparks ricochet off his skin. When a child sobbed and begged you to let him go, did you? And suddenly, Igarashi knows why he's here. I'll tell them no. I'll leave Hawks alone. I won't go back. He scrambles for anything that will get him out of this situation. I've learned. I'll never use my quirk again. Please don't hurt me. Dabi tisks. Oh, Igarashi. You're still thinking like a hero. He taps Igarashi's temple and he can't hold back a whimper. We're villains, remember? He lifts his other hand and ignites it. The glove disintegrates and the ash spills at their feet. And you hurt one of our own. Bonus. Be careful with that. There's banging and shuffling out of sight, and something scratches against the floor. Shigaraki grits his teeth. This is going to be annoying. A door, far down the other hall, slams. Dabi is hiding again. Just be quiet. We don't want him to know we're here. How could I not? Shigaraki growls as he enters the common room. What could I have possibly taken? He stops. Mr. Compressed, Toga, and Twice are gathered around a small fluffy dog. Toga is tying a red bow around the dog's neck. Twice is carrying a 30-pound bag of dog food. Mr. Compressed has maybe 8 squeaky toys in his arms. Spinner is on the other side of the room, carrying a larger box. Judging by the chirping, it's full of crickets. It was probably how the other 3 bought his silence. They all freeze, mouth comically aghast. It's not what it looks like? Toga tries, offering a strained smile. It looks like you snuck a dog into the base. Then it's exactly what it looks like. I have never seen a dog before in my life. The little Pomeranian yips at Twice as yelling, and in a moment of incredible daring, runs at Shigaraki. Mr. Compress gasps, but none of them dare get within arm range. The dog paws at his leg and barks. He chuckles. Demanding little thing, aren't you? He reaches down, careful to keep his pinkies extended, and picks her up. She jumps as he lifts her, as though she could actually jump into his arms. She eagerly licks his face, and he chuckles. Alright, it's okay. I'm excited too. He glances back at the others. I'm taking this, he says, and leaves the room without another word. None of them seem able to say anything, even when he is long out of sight. Spinner asks the question. What the fuck just happened? Chapter 7. Hawks. Hawks isn't sure how long he's been here. At first, he was determined to keep it together. The Commission likes to hold all the power, and making a prisoner lose track of time is one of the best ways to do it. He is prepared for starvation, for endless light, for irregular guard intervals. It's going to suck, he's sure, but he knows he can do it. Then the President visits. Then the blindfold. And then he floats. Time becomes binary. Quiet or shouting, alone or interrogated, in pain or waiting for more. It blurs together. Most of it is meaningless anyways. They want answers. They try to convince him to give them answers. He tells them to fuck off. It repeats like that, endlessly. And Hawks floats. Only 2 events really stand out in the haze of his captivity. Eraserhead comes and visits him. That goes better than expected. He doesn't trust hero instructors with the dirt on his boots, and wouldn't have asked for him. But Shigaraki and Dabi had both vouched for him, calling him the real deal. And if they were impressed by a hero, he had to be something special. It's the only way to save those kids, so he takes it. And it's nice. Eraser isn't a bad guy underneath all that scruff. He leaves the blindfold off. It's nice being able to see again. Everything feels more real. The pain, the bonds, himself. For the first time since they hooded him, he is grounded in reality again. Until, of course, the guards come in, see he isn't wearing his blindfold, and beat the shit out of him. From the way his chest aches, they've broken at least 2 of his ribs, maybe more. They put him back in the darkness. He's not sure how long ago that was, or if it even happened at all. Months, days, years. The only unit he has to measure time are her visits. He hears her heels click against the floor, closer and closer and closer, and then her hand is on his head. She strokes and twirls what hair remain in even circles. Kei-chan, are you ready to be good? She asks every time, and every time he answers. No. At first it's easy. He spits at her the first time and jerks away from her touch. For hours after, he remembers the feeling of her fingers and shakes. The remnants of her touch crawl over his skin like ants. But now, he cannot find the energy to lift his head as she walks towards him. She asks him, voice so gentle and sweet, and he can barely whisper his decline. She leaves, as she always does, and he nearly calls her back. Time passes, and then something different happens. It's not the jeering of guards. It's not the click tap of the president. It's not even the soft gait of Eraserhead. It's new. Two sets of footsteps. The first is light-footed, slow. The person wheezes as they breathe. They limp like a body weary with age. The other is sure. Their feet move like they are in the midst of a dance. Each step calculated and certain. But squeaky. Dress shoes? They don't stop where they're supposed to. In fact, they get halfway through the room, and one of them, an older man, gasps. Then they run to him. Hawks leans back as far as he can. They have done this before, charged at him to try and catch him off guard. The guards think it will unnerve him. They laugh when he flinches. He is prepared to be hit, though he is not sure from which side. Someone roughly tugs at his blindfold, and Hawks can see once again. Hey, Hawks, you alright? The sight that greets him is straight out of one of his nightmares. Though he is 10 years older, hair more gray than black, liver spots dotting his hands, Hawks recognizes him immediately. Hawks? He screeches, as loud as he possibly can. It punches out of his chest like a bullet. His throat aches from the force of it. His torturer falters back, but Hawks knows he won't have much time. He thrashes against the straitjacket, trying and failing to free his hands. Hawks, dear boy, calm down. There's a guard with him. Hawks hadn't even noticed. He makes no movement to reprimand Hawks, but he knows it's only a matter of time. He screeches again, and bares his teeth as much as he is able to. Even through the muzzle, he knows they're intimidating. They're yelling, screaming something at him, but he doesn't listen. He blocks out everything they say until he hears the name. Get Dabi out here! He freezes, and his eyes narrow on Igarashi. Do you have him? The old man pales, and Hawk savors the fear in his eyes. Sooner is better. Where is he? Hawks roars. He'll kill him. He'll kill both of them. If Dabi is here, he will tear the entire commission apart to find him. The guard is fumbling with the pockets of his jacket, desperately looking for something. Believe it or not, this is harder than it looks. He doesn't care what. Their weapons are meaningless. They don't matter. What matters is getting out. What matters is finding Dabi. Where is he? Where is my Dabi? And then, in a flash of cyan light, he's there. Hey there, pretty bird. Hawk stills. He's afraid if he moves, the illusion will be broken. Whatever hallucination he is having will fade, and he will once again be alone. The false Dabi takes a few steps towards him. Igarashi and the guard let him. They watch quietly as the fake Dabi slowly holds out his hands. Sorry it took so long. Dabi's hands touches his cheek, and it is glorious. It is even better than he remembers. Rough, icy fingers delicately rest against the confines of the muzzle. They are a sweet relief compared to the tacky warmth beneath the metal. Dabi's staples scratch against his skin as he traces his fingers up through Hawks' matted, sweaty hair. The prickle of his fingernails against the dried blood in his scalp feel divine. Dabi's wrist even brushes against his ear, and Hawks can feel every bump and ridge of his scarred flesh, like they were never parted. It is a heady feeling, like the world suddenly has righted on its axis. Hey, Birdie, look at me. What's wrong? Dabi is worried now, looking at Hawks in the frantic way he does when he thinks he is going to lose something. Hawks wants to reassure him, but his throat is in knots, too tight for the words to get through. Dabi runs his thumb under his eyes and wipes away the tears. Hawks hadn't realized he was crying. The salt burns the raw flesh beneath his muzzle. If this is a dream, I don't want to wake up. He chokes, and the worry eases from Dabi's shoulders, but increases in his eyes. I'm here. I'm real. You're awake. Here. He reaches around to the back of Hawks' head. Cold fingertips brush against his scalp and unclasp the clamp. The muzzle falls into his lap. The air is cool and sticky against the cuts on his face. The freedom stings. Dabi's eyes grow cold. What the fuck? Dabi traces a thumb over the raw skin, and Hawks instinctively jerks from him. What did they do to you? Someone gasps, and Hawks remembers their company. You need to go. Behind you, Dobby, please. The words are frantic and nonsensical. Hawks hardly gives a damn about what he's saying. He just knows he can't let Dobby get hurt, or worse, end up trapped like him. Dobby shushes him, runs his fingers in circles over Hawks' scalp. It feels a million times better than anything the president did. Before he can overthink it, his eyes flutter shut and he chirps. Deep breaths, Bertie, Dobby instructs. I'm gonna get this jacket undone, and you look at them a little closer, okay? Hawks nods, because he is still fairly certain he is hallucinating anyway, and hallucinations can't be arrested. Still, he keeps a sharp eye on Igarashi and the guard. The way Igarashi is standing is odd. He holds his hands together by his chest, wide smile on his face. Hiya, Hawksy. Sorry about the disguise. It is a smile with too many teeth. Himiko? She nods. The guard clears his throat. It's good to see you again, he says, and Hawk squints at him. He's rarely seen him like this, without a mask, but... Atsuhiro? He takes a bow. In the flesh? You... Hawks looks between the two of them, his breath shaky. Did you think we were just gonna leave you behind? Toga teases, and Hawks doesn't think about his answer. Of course, it was a smart choice. They stare at him, with those pitying eyes he always gets when he says something wrong. The cuffs of the straitjacket loosens, and Hawks could sob in relief. He hisses as the blood sings through his forearms. His hands rest in his lap, and he fights to get his fingers out of the sleeve. He does his best to ignore the stubs where his talons once were. Toga and Mr. Compress are polite enough to do the same. Oh, that feels phenomenal. You can always trust me to make you feel good. Dobby chuckles. He comes back around to the front of the chair and examines the chains wrapped around Hawks' ankles. Hey, mister, can you handle these? I could melt them, but, maybe next time, hot stuff. God, they're already insufferable. Compressed mutters as he kneels by Hawks' feet. I think it's sweet, Toga chimes, and Hawks winks at her. Dobby laughs, and it's the most beautiful thing Hawks thinks he's ever heard. I missed you. You fucking idiot, Dobby says with quirked lips. I missed you too. Hawks leans forward, and for the first time since he got here, he feels himself relaxed. Dobby is here, his family is here, and he is safe again. I want him. Hawks lunges forward, desperate to feel more, to be as close to Dobby as possible, and his chest screams in pain. Right, broken ribs. He has to pull away, wheezing as he does so. God, it feels like he can't breathe. He forces his frantic gasping to slow, knowing it will only make the pain worse. Fucking shit, he wheezes. Bertie, talk to me. Dobby's face is blank, but he's gritting his teeth. He's a touch away from mothering him. If Hawks had more air, he'd tease him for it. Ribs, he wheezes instead, and hopes that is enough. Judging by the way Dobby's face darkens, it is. I'm going to burn this place to the ground, he sees. His hands smoke and ignite with blue sparks. Hawks nearly coos at how cute it is. Maybe wait till we're outside, beautiful. He gasps. His breath is slowly returning to him. It's honestly not that bad, so long as he doesn't move. What's the plan? Well, I escort the good doctor out of here, Mr. Compress says, and Toga curtsies. Along with one or two guests, of course. He flashes a marble, and Hawks can't help but zero in on it. He chitters in annoyance. At this point, Compress is almost certainly doing it to fuck with him. That won't work, Hawks tells him. He tries to stand, but his knees instantly give out. Dobby attempts to catch him, but with his scarecrow body, they both go tumbling to the floor. Dobby hisses as his splint scrapes against the concrete. Fuck bird brain, Dobby scolds, and while Hawks is certain is a brilliant imitation of his mother. What the hell were you thinking? We have to... Goddamn, that knocked the wind out of him again. We have to create a distraction. You aren't doing shit, Dobby barks. He helps Hawks roll over, but doesn't let him stand. Hawks ends up cradled in Dobby's lap. an arm wrapped around his back, his head resting on Dabi's shoulder. It's the only reason he's managed to stay sitting up. Give us some credit, hero. We actually managed to survive without you. What Dabi means to say, Compress interjects, is that we already have a finale in place. Toga, if you would. She pulls a cell phone from her pocket and hits a few keys. She grins and holds up 3 fingers. 2 fingers. 1. The building shakes, drawing all his sore bones. He bites back a moan, though judging by the way Dabi grips him tighter, he is not incredibly successful. And what the hell is that? That would be the West Wing crumbling to dust. Mr. Compress grins like an entertainer during his final bout. The room begins to flash red, and a piercing alarm grates on Hawks' eardrums. We better hurry. I fear the League of Villains is attacking. Shigaraki came. Hawks doesn't even try to hide the shock from his voice. Tomura-chan! Like we could have stopped him from coming. Toga giggles. He's been worried sick about you all week. Oh. Hawks turns and hides his smile in Dabi's chest. He smells like smoke and leather, and Hawks breathes in as much as he can. He feels lightheaded with it. Relax, pretty bird, Dabi murmurs in his ear. Let's get you out of here. The world glows blue, and suddenly it's like all of the noise is underwater. He can faintly hear the wailing alarms, the echoes of Compress shouting that he has a civilian, but it's like a movie playing in another room. Hawks has always enjoyed the feeling of Compress's marvels. The atmosphere is serene in a way the real world never sees. There is no hidden threat or looming onslaught. It is a pocket of reality where he is safe and can slow down. Hey. Hawks looks up, annoyed at having to move from where he was very comfortably pressed against Dabi's stomach. Dabi isn't smiling anymore. His face grows harsh, deadly serious and sharp. Don't do that again. Hawks blinks at him. His brain still feels foggy, and he doesn't have the faintest idea as to what Dabi could mean. What? Dabi leans down, forcing Hawks to look him in the eye. He is solemn, yes, but more so, Hawks can see a reflection of his own fear on Dabi's face. He isn't the only one afraid of suddenly waking up. Don't go where I can't follow you. He fiercely grips Hawks' shoulder, accidentally pressing against his burns. But it feels like nothing compared to everything else he has faced. He can't do anything in this moment but pay attention to Dabi. His eyes are intense, pinning him down like a butterfly. No more of this self-sacrificing bullshit. It's you and me, got it? Absolutely not. Hawks has never been more sure of a decision than he was when his feathers carried Dabi out that window. He would make the same choice every time, no matter the cost. There is not a scenario that exists where he wouldn't save Dabi, but that's not what Dabi needs to hear. So Hawks nods, gives Dabi a reassuring smile despite how it stings, and does what he does best. He lies. Okay, I won't. These next words, however, could not be more true. It's you and me. Lips are on his before he can say more. He is sure it can't be pleasurable for Dabi, not in the typical way anyway. His lips are chapped, his breath is rancid from the scraps of food he's been given. He smells like sweat and blood, and his skin is clammy to the touch. It hurts where Dabi presses against him. His jaw aches from the muzzle, and his arms are still sore, though his legs are now free. He cannot even begin to move them. Dabi's staples irritate his face, and Hawks is probably going to give him an infection. It's one of the best kisses he's ever had. He pulls away. I love you. Hawks has never said it before. I love yous were never valid currency when he was growing up. Every scrap of affection had to be earned. First from his parents, then from his handlers. He'd never been good enough to receive those 3 words, and so it never occurred to him to give them to someone else. But in the time he sat there, in the time he was alone and managed to think of better things, he thought of Dabi. He vividly reimagined the look on his face as he sailed away from Hawks. It was the look of a man who has already witnessed his worst nightmare and was reliving it all over again. It was the look of a man who was losing something he loved. Over and over again, Hawks had wished for only one thing. The chance to tell Dabi he loves him back. Dabi doesn't answer him. He looks at Hawks with an awed horror, like a con man who just pulled the biggest scam of his career without actually trying. He opens his mouth and they appear in a van. Ta-da! Compressed cheers, and gestures to them with a flourish. Sweat plasters his hair to his head, and dust coats his stolen guard uniform. There is a cut on his head, maybe from shrapnel, but he and Toga are safely inside. They're already driving, not speeding or weaving, so they somehow manage to get out clean. It's one of their subtler means of transport, one of the cargo vans with benches in the back, big enough for the entire league. Much to Hawks' relief, Toga is back to her usual self. She's wrapped in a fluffy black robe with a fang pattern so familiar, Hawks is sure he bought it for her. From the driver's seat, Spinner lets out a distressed whistle that Hawks automatically answers with a low, soothing trill. The happy chirp he gets back is a balm on his last frayed nerves. Holy shit, you look terrible. I missed you so much. Twice sounds near tears, and Hawks can't bear to ignore him. He shoots Dobby an apologetic look, and his boyfriend just snorts. The moment had been long ruined anyway. Hey, Jin. Hawks rasps. I missed you too, buddy. What did they do to your hair? Honestly, it's an improvement. I got too good at seducing the guards. They needed to make me as unattractive as possible. I'm guessing that's why you have a black eye and cuts on your face. Hawks lets his head drop back, ignoring the ache behind his eyes. Shigaraki is sitting next to them, arms crossed over his chest. He frowns, petulant pout locked on Hawks. Aw, boss, were you worried about me? Of course. You're the only competent lieutenant I have. There are gasps of outrage from around the car, but Hawks laughs over them. The corner of Shigaraki's mouth twitches, and Hawks adds it to the incredibly short list of times he'd seen Shigaraki smile. You say the nicest things, he replies, fluttering his eyelashes. He forces his head back upright with a groan. The car tilts for a moment, but Hawks manages to remain conscious. The playful arguments pause, and Hawks shrinks under the pressure of all the eyes on him. Hawks, Shigaraki asks, falsely distant, as though he is asking for the status of a key mission. I'm good, Hawks assures them. No one seems to believe him, but that's not his fault. Oh, I got to talk to your celebrity crush. Shigaraki flushes a brilliant red, and Toga crows. For the last time, I don't have a crush on Eraserhead. Dabi cocks an eyebrow. Then how did you know who Hawks was talking about? Shut the fuck up. As much as I would like to revel in two beautiful men literally fighting over me, I do have important information to report. Shigaraki sits up straighter. Now this is the boss. Status report. Slide and Go and the UA safe house are compromised. Oh. Shigaraki tilts his head. He looks like a snake like this, coiled up and ready for any reason to strike. And I don't suppose you know how this happened? Well, it was more a tactical release of information. Oh, heaven help us, Mr. Compress mutters, but Shigaraki and Hawks ignores him. Dabi's arm tenses, and Hawks subtly intertwines their hands. He offers a reassuring squeeze, mentally begging Dabi not to worry. He knows what he's doing. And you clear yourself to release this information? Hawk smirks. Well, I was the most senior officer present. Toga snorts and hides her smirk in the collar of her robe. Shigaraki is not so amused. And your reasons for this were? 1. We haven't used the UA safe house in months, Hawks points out. And with the trader, we don't really need it. Also, I hate it, and it's creepy as fuck, so that's no huge loss. Shigaraki grumbles, but doesn't contradict him. 2. Sliding Go was getting reckless, and was about to be figured out anyway. This way, we at least know he's compromised, so we can feed the heroes false information. Plus, that guy hates me for having a higher ranking than him, and I think it'll be funny. And 3rd, I did something you're gonna love. Hawks grins, showing his teeth. I show Eraserhead the cracks in Hero Society. He's starting to doubt. Shigaraki's eyes widen, and his pupils dilate. Really? Yep, might even rally against the commission, if he likes those kids as much as he says. He cackles and runs a hand through Hawks' hair. Good work, hero. Hawks can't help but preen under the attention. He warbles, making Dobby roll his eyes. God, Krusty, if you're going to eye-fuck my boyfriend, at least ask me first. He scowls, but Hawks can tell by the quirk of his lips he's hiding a smile. Shigaraki again turns a delightful red all the way to his ears. What the fuck? They argue, escalating in threat and volume, but never in seriousness. The rest of the league join in, either teasing Shigaraki or scolding Dobby. Dobby is ranting about something stupid, and the vibrations rumble against his chest. Hawks focuses on the hum but ignores the words. And finally, with his report given and his family safe, Hawks lets the weight of his week settle over him. He falls asleep to the sound of Dobby laughing. Chapter 8. Koharu. At Kyokoko 1, the HPSC got what they deserved. That's what happens when you lock up the guy who saved 50 people from a building at Official Mount Lady destroyed last month. At Sakamoto_Slim. Our hearts go out to the HPSC employees. Thank you so much for protecting our city. #support HPSC. At Gay for the Sun. You're in his DMs. I'm breaking him out of the HPSC. We are not the same. At Faye.wonder.bug. Some of you are really out here like. At Hawksgate is real. I hope I'm not just a mutual to you all, but a Hawks simp as well. At Yuka_O. Even if you don't agree with the commission, they deserve our empathy. All human lives deserve respect. At Brave New World replied, them first. At Super Sapphic. Dobby isn't gonna fuck you. You don't have to keep sucking the league's dick. At Akira.Tanaka. Can you trigger warning Hawks? No, but I can hit you with my car. At Proud Lad. This attack is a clear example of how mutants are a danger to our society. I know that's not PC to say, but it's the truth. And if you don't believe that after this, I don't know what to tell you. Let's begin by looking at the history of Tweet 1 of 47. Koharu turns off the notifications on her phone. It's been pinging non-stop since yesterday, with news alerts and Twitter notifications and regular old text messages from acquaintances asking her what she thinks about the attack on the HPSC. Honestly, she's pretty tired of all of it. 3 of her emergency calls yesterday have been for brawls at shopping malls and restaurants after Temper's flares of violence. No matter what they thought of the League of Villains, no one could deny that society was feeling the aftershocks of the attack on the HPSC. Koharu walks through one of the poorer parts of town. Even if she hadn't known already, the dilapidated buildings and cracked sidewalks would have told her it was somewhere the city long forgot. The streets are emptier than usual. Even in this part of town, people were keeping their heads down. Perhaps especially in this part of town. The air smells like smog and cigarettes, despite the mask she wore. A man across the street watches her, and Koharu can hear faint, tinny music playing through his open window. He whistles when they make eye contact. Koharu clutches her shoulder bag a little tighter and does her best to pretend she is horrifically out of her element. What Koharu is doing is undoubtedly stupid. Like, really, utterly, incredibly stupid. Like, could get her killed if everything goes according to plan, stupid. Amy hadn't tried to talk her out of it, but Koharu knew she wanted to. Amy's heart was pounding as they said goodbye, and the pink in her hair dulled with apprehension. But she didn't say anything, so Koharu didn't either. She merely clutched her clothes, cupped her hand around the back of Amy's head. It'll all be okay, Koharu whispered into Amy's ear. You'll see. Then she left. According to her source, a vigilante who she may or may not have helped set a broken arm, a clubber had been found unconscious and bleeding in an alleyway without her purse, sometime around 11 p.m. This would have seemed like a typical mugging if the testimony of a grocery store clerk hadn't placed her buying food around 1 a.m. This is impossible, unless someone is able to be in 2 places at once, or has a quirk like Himiko Toga. The League of Villains is hiding out somewhere nearby. Koharu is certain of it, and if she wants to find them before they disappear again, this is the best chance she's got. Like she said, stupid. But she's here anyway, because she remembers the way Hawks had flinched from her hand and the panic in his voice when he said, I'm terrified of telling you something that will get you killed. If he was already so afraid of the possible repercussions, even when under the Commission's orders. She's scared to think of what could have happened after his arrest. The Commission has been silent regarding Hawks' imprisonment or trial, and Koharu doesn't think it was an oversight. The bag of medical supplies weigh heavy at her side. For that reason, she's gone to the area's one remaining pharmacy, a chain with prices so low it choked out the rest of the competition. Its sign flickers, and Koharu can see the shadow of a bird's nest tucked in one of the letters. The sliding doors groan when they open, like every customer entering may be their last. A spray paint mural of stain decorates the left wall. It's so crudely drawn, Koharu can't tell if it's for or against him. She settles on a bench on the other side of the street. With one earbud in, she opens the matching game on her phone and pretends not to stare at the heartbeats of every person who approaches the drugstore. It's a mild day, thankfully, so most of their heartbeats are at an average pace. She keeps her eyes peeled for anything out of the ordinary. She has 2 false alarms while waiting. One, a shoplifter who, judging by their frantic heart, has never actually shoplifted before. And considering the speed at which the other man rushes in and out with a bouquet of flowers, she decides he's forgotten an anniversary. It's nearly 6 o'clock, and she almost decides to call it quits when she spots the man in a black hoodie. His heartbeat stutters, as though it has to fight to move. There's a reluctance to it, one that reminds her of knee braces and physical therapy. Something that knows it should move, but no longer can. If she didn't know better, she'd say the man's heart is scarred, somehow. Oh. Koharu gasps. She shoves her phone in her pocket and runs out into the street. A horn blares and tires screech, but she pays it no mind. She sprints inside the pharmacy, ignoring the cashier's eye roll. The man is in the back left corner comparing 2 pill bottles. It's pretty incredible if she's being honest. He blends in well with the rest of the crowd. He's wearing a face mask similar to hers and dark sunglasses, both covering the burns on his face. Long gloves hide the staples on his hands. If she hadn't been looking for him, Koharu would never know she was looking at the League of Villains, Dabi. This is so fucking stupid. She takes a deep breath and grits her teeth. She tucks her hands in her pockets so she doesn't fidget with them. Then, Koharu walks up to one of the most dangerous men in Japan. Sir? Her voice catches, and she resists the urge to curse. She swallows. You look like you need some help. He doesn't turn to face her, merely glances in her direction. His glasses dip down on the bridge of his nose, and shit. If there had been any doubt about his identity before, those cobalt blue eyes would have given him away. For a moment, she swears she can see the flames flickering in his glare. I'm good. He looks away, clearly deeming the conversation over. She clears her throat, and he growls. His anger sets off some base instinct in her, and she is electric with primal fear. She feels like a rabbit staring down a wolf. Do you need a bigger hint? I'm gonna die in a goddamn CVS. What about your bird? She says, barreling over his dismissal. She nods to the medicine he's holding. He needs help, right? Dabi stiffens. Slowly, deliberately, he places the bottles into the shopping basket he's holding. Suddenly, his full attention is on her, and she has no idea why she wanted it. She's an ant under a microscope, waiting to be burnt by the sun. Dabi's gloves start smoking, and the whole aisle reeks of char and melting plastic. You should think of your next words very carefully. Koharu swallows her fear. I'm an EMT. He got her at the commission, right? I can help. He reaches out and clenches a fist around her shirt collar. Embers and scraps of wool fall rain on the ground. It feels like someone is holding a hot iron up to her chest. You want to say that a little louder so the whole store hears you? Koharu stifles a yelp and instinctively reaches up to where he's holding her. She grimaces when it burns her hands. She's losing ground here, and quickly. If she's going to convince him, it has to be now. Her eyes lock on his basket and the supplies he risks blowing his cover to retrieve. Ibuprofen and acetaminophen. Fever reducers and pain relievers. Antiseptic and antibiotic ointment. Burn creams with a vitamin E to reduce scarring. It's a start. His wounds are infected, aren't they? It's a guess, but given how annoyed Dabi looks, it's apparently a good one. That's none of your goddamn business. She raises her hand and slowly moves him to her bed. I have medicine, antibiotics. If the infection takes a turn for the worst, he'll die. There's no reason to let that happen. The words come easy now, without nerves fettering them to her lips. An easy calm settles over her, and Koharu wonders if she is in shock. Dabi keeps one scalding hand dangerously close to her throat and, with the other, unzips her kit. He briefly rifles through it and lets out a confused hum. He clearly didn't expect her to be telling the truth. She offers what she hopes is a convincing smile. See? His eyes snap back to her. They narrow. His anger still flares like a supernova. And what's to stop me from taking that and burning you to ashes in a back alley? She expects the rush of terror, but it's distant, like an echo through a canyon in her chest. Because I'm trained in providing medical services. She reaches into her pocket and pulls out her wallet, and shows Dabi her EMT license. Do you have anyone else with medical training on site? I know enough. About proper medical dosage? How many milligrams he'll need to take to get better but not enough to make him sick? You can overdose on antibiotics, you know. Dabi doesn't answer her, so she pushes forward. What about broken bones? Internal bleeding? If the commission treats Hawks the way I think they do, both are a possibility. Do you even know how to check for them? What about monitoring his vitals? How far do you expect WebMD to get you? The grip on her shirt tightens. She can see black marks smearing out from his fingers. If you're here, it means you're in trouble. And if I found you, it won't be long until the HPSC or the police tries the same trick. So please, let me help you. Dabi stares at her for a moment. She can't tell what he's thinking behind his sunglasses, but for a horrible second, she's certain she is going to die. Then he drops her. Fine, but keep up, and hide these. He crams the supplies he's holding into her first aid kit. She doesn't even bother trying to protest. What does stealing matter at this point? Dabi leads her down a seemingly random assortment of alleys and back streets. She's certain they backtracked at least twice, but knowing this didn't stop her from getting horribly turned around. About 10 minutes after she completely gives up on keeping track of where she is, Dabi walks to a dingy building with weeds growing out of the foundation. He shoves a hand towards her. Give me your phone. Koharu resists the urge to tell him to fuck off. Okay, let me just send one message. Oh, need to tell your boyfriend you love him. Koharu glares at him. Do you really want a missing persons case open for me while I'm staying here? Fine. Dabi scoffs. Just be quick about it. Koharu types out a message with as much caution as possible, trying to control her shaking thumbs. Plan worked, may be gone for a few days. Call work for me. She bites her lip. How can she possibly tell Amy everything she wants to say? How can she give her wife everything she deserves, when these could be her last words to her? She can only try with the most honest statement she knows. I love you so much. She hands the phone over. Immediately it buzzes. Amy's contact picture taking up the screen as she calls. When she sees her wife's smiling face, she nearly attempts to snatch the phone back. Dabi notices it, smirks at her, and rejects the call. Come on, we have work to do. Dabi throws the door open with so much force it slams into the wall. Judging by the doorknob-shaped dent, this isn't the first time this has happened. Koharu silently drifts in behind him, careful to keep from drawing attention to herself. Hey fuckfaces, I'm home, Dabi yells. He receives no response, but doesn't seem bothered by it. He jerks his head to the right. Birds this way. They only walk through one hallway, but Koharu can tell this place is as filthy and decrepit on the inside as it is on the outside. Spiderweb cracks creep up the walls, and she can see mold spreading out from a black spot on the ceiling. She can't say she's shocked that Hawks' injuries, whatever they may be, have gotten infected. Hawks is spread out on the couch in a makeshift living room, and Koharu barely stifles her gasp at the sight of him. Hawks looks bad. Even ignoring the black eye, or the inflamed cuts on his cheek, or the bandages wrapped around his torso, it's clear he is in a sorry state. He's on his stomach, resting on pillows, with his head in Spinner's lap. His face is flush and slick with sweat. It mats down his hair, leaving it a damp, dirty brown. He looks up at them, and though he is smiling, his eyes are glassy. Koharu isn't sure how much he is really seeing. Dabi, he chirps, and reaches out a shaky hand. He makes a childish, grabbing motion. You came back. It's so minute that Koharu barely notices it happening, but Dabi relaxes. Again, it's not a lot. His shoulders still hold in against the world's stiffness, but he smiles back at Hawks and takes his hand. Of course I did, pretty bird, Dabi assures him. Promised I would, didn't I? I've been promised a lot of things, Hawks pouts. I very rarely get them. Dabi opens his mouth to say something about this, but Hawks never lets him get there. Cuddle with me. Spinner's gotten all warm. Spinner rolls his eyes. That's the thanks I get for nearly getting heat stroke trying to cool your ass down. You know I can't sweat, right? Thank you. I love you. Hawks presses a kiss to his hand with each word. Now give me my lovely, shiny boyfriend. A frill in Spinner's neck puffs up, and he seems too embarrassed to say anything else. Gently, Dabi and Spinner switch places, moving Hawks as little as possible. Koharu notes that they are extra careful around his chest and makes a note to ask about it later. Hawks snuggles as close to him as possible, sighing in relief as Dabi presses a hand to his forehead. I am never complaining about your icicle hands ever again, Hawks purrs. This is heavenly. Dabi shushes him and detangles the knots in his hair. Don't move so much, Birdie. Rest. Someone is here to help take care of you. Immediately, Hawks shakes his head. He whistles and it's a low, pitiful tune. His heart rate spikes like a panicked lark trying to escape his chest. No doctors. I can't get sick. I'm not sick. They'll be mad at me. His breathing quickens and he tries to squirm from Dabi's grip. He babbles, delirious, and he is near hyperventilating. Dabi scrambles to string together words of comfort, and Spinner chirps at him with frenetic worry, and Koharu can tell she needs to step in sooner rather than later. She pulls a thermometer and antibiotics from her bag. She kneels down, getting on eye level with Hawks. Hawks, hey. He catches her eye and stills. Koharu takes advantage of the silence. You might not remember me, but you're that EMT. The one from when I got hit by the quirk. His eyes stare straight through her, never focusing, but seeing her nonetheless. Something in her chest cracks, and her eyes well with hot tears. Yes, that's me, she sobs. I was worried about you. She nearly laughs at that. Dabi is glaring daggers at her, but she doesn't have time to deal with it. I was worried about you too, she tells him. She wipes the tears from her face and smiles at him. To her surprise, it isn't forced. Now, you protected me, right? Left because you didn't want to be hurt? He nods slowly, as though he isn't quite sure of the answer, but she'll take it. Now, I'm gonna help you, alright? And it's gonna be a secret. I kept the last secret you told me, and I'm going to keep this one too, okay? Hawks blinks at her. Okay. And Koharu gets to work. Much later, after Hawks falls asleep, long after she has sanitized his wounds and forced pills and a glass of water down his throat, Dabi continues to stare at her. She didn't think it was possible for a man to look so intimidating with his partner cuddling him like a teddy bear. But then again, she has never seen anyone with eyes like Dabi's. They press into her like a hot steel rod, and she can't help but flinch. She is nearly certain she sees light casting off them in the dim room. You didn't tell me you knew him. Koharu shrugs. I didn't think he'd remember me, she answers honestly. She doesn't know how to describe their one-sided relationship to Dabi. Doesn't have the words to express the thrill of fear that goes through her heart when she sees a new story about the League. Fear not directed at them, but for them, and for Hawks in particular. Hawks has become a major part of her story, but she did not expect to be anything but a blip in his. Then why show up? The answer comes without thought. I wanted to help him. Dabi hums. He sticks out his leg and gestures to the ankle he has wrapped in a sports bandage. Give me a hand with this. Koharu takes that as a win. Hawks' fever breaks the next afternoon. The redness and swelling in his burns and cuts fades to something that could pass as normal. He's coherent by the evening, apologizing to her with a humiliated aura of someone who isn't used to being cared for. She checks over his ribs as well as she can without an x-ray, and helps put him in a recovery position. The following morning, his appetite returns. He is initially reluctant to indulge in the raw steak in front of her, but once Koharu gives the okay, he turns into it with fervent hunger. They're all good signs, but it's not enough. His missing talons and feathers are beginning to regrow, but Koharu has no idea whether they are growing back properly. Even if she knew for the fact they weren't, she wouldn't know how to fix them. Furthermore, his feet are a mess. There are lesions on the base of his feet, swelling at the joints, and she has no idea what could have possibly caused it. And his wings. She doesn't even know if they'll grow back after this kind of damage. The human parts of Hawks she can treat just fine. His mutant features, however, they leave her far out of her depth. So when she spots her phone in the pocket of Dobby's abandoned coat, it takes less than a minute for Koharu to make the decision. She reluctantly ignores the many distraught texts from her wife and calls a familiar phone number. Then she calls her wife. 5 minutes before her specialist shows up, Koharu tells Dobby that a doctor is coming over. What the fuck is your problem? Needless to say, he isn't pleased. The rest of the league, at least, doesn't seem entirely against her. On her second night in the safe house, Toga led her to a spare bedroom, citing something about how Big Sis Mag would never forgive her for leaving Koharu to fend against the boys. Spinner never failed to act as her assistant when treating Hawks, and never questioned the orders she's giving in the past. So, she's pretty sure those two, at least, won't kill her outright. Mr. Compressed is impossible to read behind his mask, and while Twice wears his heart on his sleeves, she can't tell which of his two opinions is actually sincere. Shigaraki has yet to look up from his switch, so she doesn't think he has any idea what's going on. Hawks at least likes her, but he may be biased since she's given him a steady supply of prescription painkillers. I'm so dead. She takes a deep breath and repeats herself. I'm not able to treat Hawks on my own, so I called someone who can. Hot steam billows from Dobby's nose. You didn't think to mention this earlier? You would have said no. You're damn right. You gave someone the location of a protective safe house while one of my players is at critical health? Shigaraki squints at her, and the 8-bit tune coming from his console pauses. Though the tune had been annoying, to say the least, the silence is suddenly more boring. Well, when you say it that way, what gives you the right? He sneers, and judging by the look on the rest of the league's faces, they are beginning to wonder the same. Listen, I'm a good EMT, but I'm not a doctor, she admits. And certainly not the kind of doctor Hawks needs. The guy I called is an expert in heteromorphic quirks like Hawks and Spinners. We need him. And you just think he's just going to walk into the League of Villains hideout and be fine with it? Dobby scoffs. Koharu resists the urge to frown. All this skepticism and they don't even know who he is yet. She tries to give her friend at least some credibility. He already knows this job isn't exactly above water. Jesus fuck, so he knows enough to bring backup. I think it sounds fun. Hawks giggles. We should vote. Whatever you say, Hawks. League rules say high people don't get to vote. Koharu feels a stress headache blooming at the base of her skull. Look, Hawks needs an expert and a cold one, Koharu tells them. She hides the trembling in her hands as she glares at Japan's most wanted. He specializes in quirk medicine, and we've done house visits like this before. I trust him. I'm putting my life on the line here too, damn it. Her frustration is starting to get the best of her. It's one of the reasons she is glad she doesn't work in the hospital. There's a lot more time for arguments about the proper methods of treatment. In an ambulance, you just act. I told you I was going to do what I needed to in order to help Hawks, and this is it. There is a knock at the door. Dobby scowls at her. She bites her lip. There's another knock, louder and more insistent. Then Hawks whimpers. Please, Dobby, can we just try it? Dobby's rage extinguishes. Fine. The word is pure acid, gnawing away at her flesh, but Koharu forces herself to stand firm. But we'll see if he walks away. Koharu nods, as Twice goes to open the door. Forgive me, she thinks to her friend, and prays this isn't a mistake. The door opens. Standing in there, nearly as tall as the doorframe, is the medical student Koharu called, Natsuo Todoroki. There's a thud as Shigaraki's switch falls to the ground. Koharu waits for the explosion. She is nearly certain that when Dobby sees the child of Endeavor on her doorstep, he is going to incinerate him on the spot. She turns around slowly, scared to see his reaction, but her fears seem to be completely unfounded. Dobby hasn't even made a move to stand. He merely stares at Natsu with a purposely blank expression on his face. It is quiet for a moment. Then Hawks lets out a weak but raucous laugh. Sorry, he slurs. But that's really funny. Chapter 9, Epilogue. Right back where we started. When Dabi sees Natsu standing in the doorway, something in his brain fractures. The little part of him that is still a wailing 9-year-old is back in that house again. Somewhere deep in his head, he is cowering in front of his brother and sister, while a monster looming larger than a nightmare spits at him that he should be better. So while he struggles with calming the crying toddler in his psyche, Shigaraki, of all people, speaks up. You brought the son of the #1 hero here? He hisses. Toga growls and the rest of the league stiffen at the mention. They must not have realized. Dabi doubts Shigaraki would have either, if he didn't know Dabi's whole tragic backstory. He must have looked into his family and done the world's creepiest employee background check. Mukai stutters, but no words come out. If Dabi had the wherewithal, he'd smirk as all the confidence she had blustered drains from her face. Instead, he can only stay frozen, lest Enji see him moving and take note. A bandaged hand slides against his own, and Dabi clutches it so tight not even All Might himself could separate them. He is fairly certain the weight of Hawks in his lap is the only thing keeping him from bolting out of the room. Shigaraki stands and snarls, and even takes a step towards Mukai before being interrupted by Natsu himself. You know who I am? Shigaraki stills at that, turning to give Natsu his full attention. He tilts his head to the side, letting his hair fall from his eyes. The entirety of that deadly stare is aimed at Natsu. Do you think we're stupid, hero brat? Or were you just hoping you could infiltrate our ranks without repercussions? To his credit, Natsu doesn't buckle beneath the weight of the very gaze that left Overhaul a sniveling mess. He meets it with a cold glare of his own. Most Endeavor fanboys only know about Shoto, so I'm surprised is all. I'm flattered you'd recognize little old me. He adds with a wink. It's the same sass that landed Natsu on the receiving end of more than one backhand. Dabi doesn't know whether to laugh or shake him. And regarding my father, Natsu spits the word like a curse. I haven't talked to that guy since Dabi put him in the hospital. He shoots Dabi a cool glance. Thanks for that, by the way, he says, voice deadpan. And Dabi can't hold back a smirk. Save the thanks for when I kill him. He ignores Hawks' knowing grin and Shigaraki's raised eyebrow. Assholes. Natsu, on the other hand, merely nods. Seems like there's no love lost between you, Mr. Compressed muses. However, that does not prove you to be on our side. How are we to know you are not acting as a rat in our midst? Natsu huffs and taps out an anxious beat on the creaky floor. His eyes keep flickering to the couch, and for a moment, Dabi is worried he's been recognized. But then he realizes those worried glances aren't directed at him, but at Hawks. Either you can kick me out and lose track of me, meaning I can do whatever the fuck I want with no supervision from you, or you can invite me into your little clubhouse and record me for at least some kind of blackmail. Or you can kill me. Decide quickly, because I'm not going to stand here and argue when someone needs my help. And with that, he pushes past twice and kneels down beside Hawks, and consequently, in front of Dabi. Dabi tries to keep the panic off his face, and must fail, because Shigaraki cackles like he's high on nitrous. He gets himself under control, only to catch Natsu's confused expression and busts out laughing all over again. This is the best day of my life. Glad you're amused, Dabi drones, rage seeping into his tone. He debates the pros and cons of passing Hawks off to Spinner so he can kick Shigaraki's ass. Now, are you going to do anything about this? He says, and gestures to where his fucking brother is a fucking foot in front of him. Shigaraki chuckles, barely reining in his laughter. Oh no, you seem to have this all under control. His face darkens. Besides, we have plenty of incentive for him to complete this questline. Twice. Toga, keep Mukai-chan entertained while he looks over Hawks. He smiles with the grace of an undertaker at a funeral. Wouldn't want to distract you while you're working. Toga has a knife to the EMT's throat before she can even react. This is gonna be so much fun! Toga cheers. Like a slumber party. Sure, Mukai replies, a shrill panic thing, but she gives no resistance as she is forced from the room. Her wide eyes flash to Hawks. Play nice, Hawks yells after them, and twice shoots them a thumbs down, which quickly switches to a thumbs up. Natsu looks up from his supplies, expression blank as he watches them take Mukai away. You didn't need to do that. She just wants to help. Shigaraki shrugs. I know, she's proven that. I really prefer if you don't give me a reason to kill her. He holds out his hand. Phone. The transition is so jarring, Natsu physically jumps at it. Huh? Shigaraki speaks slowly, over-enunciating every word. Give me your phone. Natsu does as he asks, and looks disappointed, but not surprised, when it crumbles to dust instantaneously. Have Daddy buy you a new one. Shigaraki jeers, with a smugness that only makes Dabi want to punch him more. If he tries anything, kill him, he orders, already walking out the room. I have things to attend to. The room is nearly empty now. Mr. Compress vanished at some point during the argument, probably when he realized Toga was planning one of her slumber parties, and Spinner takes a seat in the corner of the room under the window. His eyes are closed like he isn't paying attention, but Dabi would bet his last pack of medical staples he's standing guard. Natsu begins looking over Hawks' vitals, checking his temperature, heart rate, blood pressure, and other incredibly boring numbers. The silence is only broken by the beeping of medical equipment and Spinner's soft breathing. It feels heavy in Dabi's lungs, like he's suddenly sucking in carbon dioxide rather than oxygen. He can't stand the tense quiet. Instead, he flicks Natsu's ear to get his attention, relishes the scowl it earns him. How'd you get into freak medicine anyway? Dabi asks, tone laced with mockery. Figured you help the poor, cursed mutants. Get a cushy job with the Quirk Registry? Toga and Spinner have told him all about the types of people who get into the Quirk medicine. It's the kind of people Dabi hates. Sanctimonious bastards who act like missionaries sent to work with lepers, rather than doctors with patients who desperately need to be treated. The thought makes him sick. Natsu glares with a burning hatred Dabi doesn't expect, but knows how to work with. It's the same expression Shoto wore during the sports festival. It's the same way Toya had looked at his father. It's an anger bred deeper into the Todoroki bloodline than the fire in their veins. Good. Having Natsu here put him on edge, and the sooner Dabi gets him to blow up, the sooner he has an excuse to throw him out of the safe house. He waits for the explosion, for the bitter yelling. The fire Natsu may not show in a quirk, but shows in his temper. But instead of firing off in a Todoroki-worthy eruption, Natsu turns to Hawks. You seriously like this guy? The mutant-hating prick? Is he holding you captive? Blink twice if you need help. Hawks barks out a laugh that quickly gives way to a stuttering groan. Fucking shit, he moans and wraps his arms around his chest. Serves you right, Dabi mutters as he glances over Hawks for any sign of his injuries getting worse. Bird brain can't even remember his ribs are fractured. Hawks wheezes but still offers Natsu a shaky grin. Don't mind Dabi, he stage whispers, as though he isn't in Dabi's lap and actually has a chance of keeping this from him. This is just his way of making sure you aren't a quirk supremacist or something. By baiting me with offensive comments? Hawk shrugs. It works surprisingly well most of the time. Bigots love gossiping with other bigots. If you must know. Natsu bites his lip, and Dabi can tell he is deciding whether or not to tell the truth. It's the same look he got on his face when their mother would ask if he'd like the horrific sweaters the grandparents would send them. Natsu sighs. I'm going into quirk medicine because no one goes into it, not for the right reasons. It's a complicated and thankless field. You need to know an insane amount, but the field is so broad. My studies include everything from animal biology to the physics of light and water. It makes earning the degree nearly impossible. But if a quirk specialist had treated my brother, he probably wouldn't have died when we were kids. Dabi's jaw drops. Natsu misunderstands his shock. Yeah, Natsu chuckles bitterly. Not a lot of people know what actually happened to my brother, if they know about him at all. He glares at his hands, clenching them into white-knuckled fists, killed by his own quirk. And here's the kicker. He grins at Dobby, with the glee of someone who knows they can knock an adversary down a peg. Toya's condition? Totally manageable, especially with the money my family had. I went to school to discover how I could have saved my brother, only to discover someone else figured it out 30 years ago. He breaks eye contact, but Dobby doesn't. He's afraid he'll do something stupid if he moves, like hug him or something. Natsu pulls a small device out of his bag. So why am I doing this? His hand shakes with tension. I just don't want to let people suffer for no reason. Dobby's eyes are burning, and he blinks rapidly to get rid of the feeling. That only succeeds in making them sting, and it makes his nose run. Thankfully, neither Hawks nor Natsu pay his sudden allergy attack no mind. Natsu is holding the device steady over Hawks, and a red light scans up and down his back. Hawks chuckles apprehensively. Should I be worried? Mukai-san told me you had some rib fractures. She told me everything felt fine, but I'm taking a closer look, making sure nothing is healing incorrectly. Hawks twists his head to look over his shoulder, enticed by the low hum of the machine. During his squirming, he pushes into the staples on Dobby's thigh, and it hurts like a motherfucker. Hawks, however, barely notices. His eyes are locked on the machine in Natsu's hand. Is that a portable x-ray machine? We used to have one of those at my agency. How the fuck did you manage to afford one of those? Natsu huffs. It's amazing what Endeavor will believe to be necessary for my coursework. He rolls his eyes. Benefits of him having absolutely no interest in my career. It's how I fund most of my excursions with Mukai-san. She mentioned those, Hawks says, eyes narrowing in interest. What does she mean by that? Natsu actually looks embarrassed, despite the fact that he's taunted the leader of the League of Villains not even 5 minutes earlier. He smiles and scratches the back of his head. Well, it's sort of a guerrilla health system. I have no idea what the fuck you are talking about, but god do I want to. Hawks beams. What the hell does that mean? Natsu sighs, and the embarrassment fades into something more melancholy. So, I don't know if any of you know this, but a lot of medical treatments for people with mutants aren't covered by insurance. What? Hawks asks, though he sounds more angry than shocked. The care is categorized as cosmetic. As a result, families have to pay out of pocket for what should be a routine treatment. So, sometimes Mukai-san and I get involved. She points me towards families who may not have gotten the care they need, and I get my hands on what supplies I can and do what I'm capable of. Luckily for you, it means I've had hands-on experience helping people with raptor traits. He glances at Hawks' mummified fingers and feet. I'll check your other problem spots later. It's your back I'm most worried about, particularly your wings. He places a hand over the clamp holding the bandages loosely around Hawks' chest. May I take a look? Go for it, Doc. Hawks chirps. Fair warning, though. It's not a pretty sight. Natsu takes the end of the gauze Dobby had so painstakingly applied the night he had brought Hawks home, and begins to unwind them. He moves with delicate care that speaks of experience rather than raw talent. It's mesmerizing to watch. The more of Hawks' back he reveals, the greater the pit in Dobby's stomach becomes. Though non-stick bandages still cover the worst of the wounds, Dobby can see the leathery edges poking out where the supplies had shifted. Hawks' feather had taken the brunt of Endeavor's attack. His feathers had spared his shoulders and the base of his wings from anything worse than second degree. His tail feathers protected his legs, but his lower back. Dobby remembers the way his own skin had looked after it began to peel off his body. The flesh burnt away in a round pattern, showing where his blood had literally boiled. Hawks' burns don't look nearly as bad. They're a massive expanse of pinks and browns, as opposed to Dobby's violent reds that scarred like charred meat. The Commission, though a bunch of bastards, had clearly given Hawks better treatment than cleanings in gas station sinks and shoplifted tubes of antibiotic ointment. But the smell. It smelled the same, like steak mere days from going bad. Not bad particularly, but wrong. Bile rises in his throat, and he bites his tongue to keep it down. Hey. Hawks places his hands on his face, thumb lightly perched against his cheekbone, ready to wipe away impossible tears. It's okay. I'm okay. Besides, he chuckles and smiles with horrific sincerity. Now we match. Dabi is all too aware of Natsu's eyes on them, and there is nothing he can will himself to say. So instead, he presses a kiss to Hawks' forehead and holds him there. In the end, Natsu doesn't come to a conclusion about Hawks' wings. Honestly, I can see it going either way. He packs up his kit as he talks, avoiding Hawks' eyes. Depends on how deep the scarring goes, and whether or not your feathers have anywhere left to grow from. From what you've told me about your quirk, it seems your wings are designed to regrow, and that's a good sign. For better or worse, you were lucky to be treated in such a high-tech facility. Otherwise, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. I'd just be giving you bad news. Hawk scowls. Believe me, that was the last thing the commission wanted. Natsu nods, though he doesn't understand. They gave you a chance. All we can do now is continue to keep the area clean and hope. He leaves them alone after that, and the moment his footsteps fade, Hawks goes limp as a corpse. He turns and hides his face in Dabi's stomach. Though he does not make a sound, Dabi can feel hot, thick tears soak through his shirt. Dabi can only whisper meaningless reassurances into Hawks' hair, and know that, once again, he is powerless to do anything. He envisions clamping his hands around Enji Todoroki's throat until he stops kicking. But the image doesn't bring him as much joy as it used to. Looking down at his unresponsive boyfriend, Dabi realizes something. With all the profound banality of the earth turning, for the first time since his hair turned white, there is something he wants more than Endeavor's death. That night, for the first time since they got to the safe house, Dabi and Hawks get to sleep on a bed rather than the couch. Natsu is bigger than any of the members of the league, and has the athleticism to carry Hawks up 2 floors without jostling his injuries. When they were kids, Natsu was always outgrowing Dabi, but now, he's at least a head taller and twice as broad. Dabi literally has to look up at him to make eye contact, and he fucking hates it, just like he hated it when they were growing up. It's not because of how he jumps at the sight of Natsu's silhouette in the doorway, the way he has to actively fight from taking a step back whenever Natsu passes too close. It's just stupid petty sibling bullshit. He isn't scared of Natsu of all people. Hawks nearly melts into the shitty mattress, no longer bothering to hide how much this ordeal has weighed on him. The bags under his eyes seem more prominent in the golden light on the bedside table. Come here, Hawks demands, and holds up an arm for Dabi to slide under. Dabi chuckles and obliges. He is careful to layer a sheet between them. The last thing they needed was for Dabi's staples to get caught in Hawks' claws. They had made that mistake before, and it had ended in Hawks being an hour late for patrol, and Dabi tracking down Garen for emergency medical care in the back alley. Not a scenario he wants to repeat. Hawks cuddles up next to him, resting his head on Dabi's shoulder, and for a brief second, Dabi thinks they're just going to fall asleep like that. And then, Hawk speaks. So, are we going to talk about it? Dabi groans and covers his eyes with his free arm. There is nothing to talk about. Of course there is. Natsu's here. Hawks reaches up and delicately pulls his hand away from his face. He looks at Dabi with eyes so concerned and trusting, like he has forgotten he's in bed with a murderer. Dabi sneers. Funny you think that matters. Are you really still that naive? The words are barbed, but Hawks grabs onto them without fear. No, and I'm not naive enough to fall for this act again, either. Dabi scoffs. You and your fucking hero complex. Hawks frowns, but doesn't stop. You know, you call his name sometimes, when you have nightmares. If he wasn't so injured, Dabi would have shoved him off the bed. You should shut the fuck up. Heat is building deep in his core. Dabi is certain Hawks can feel it when they're pressed against each other. Still, the idiot barrels forward. Dabi, it's okay that you miss him. From what you've told me, You and Natsu, you were close. Hawks takes a deep breath, then says something insane. You should tell him who you are. Dabi levels him with an icy stare, and digs his fingers into the bedsheets. His knuckles sting where they pull against his staples, and he feels blood beating at the seams. The room jumps in and out of focus with his scattered breaths. And why would I do that? And maybe Hawks can take a hint, because that moony, doe-eyed concern hides behind a goofy grin. Well, most importantly, I need to be properly introduced to my brother-in-law. Hawks teases and flares his eyelashes. I didn't have any siblings of my own, so I fully plan to steal yours. Dabi laughs this by himself, and reluctantly begins to relax. He's in familiar territory with Hawks being an asshole, rather than that sincere man who tried to bandage all his shattered edges. Bird brain. In case you've forgotten, we're not married. Hawks hums in thought, and it tickles Dabi's chest. We could be. Hawks purrs, and grins up at him like the little shit he is. Dabi is lucky his face is so fucked up. Otherwise, it'd be completely obvious he's blushing. No sane government official would sign off on it. Are you crazy? True, us being villains does make this more complicated. Hawks agrees. He trails his fingers over one of Dabi's scars, even though he knows Dabi can barely feel it. The light pressure feels more like the memory of a touch than the actual act itself. However, given the fact we are trying to dismantle society anyway, I have decided it doesn't matter. He pushes himself forward, grunting through the stiffness in his movements. Idiot knows he shouldn't be moving, but does it anyway. Hawks is nearly completely on top of Dabi at this point, one of their favorite ways to fall asleep. The only thing missing is the weight of Hawks' wings draped over them, like the world's most annoying blanket. Hawks settles close, chin perched between Dabi's pecs. They are one swift movement away from kissing, and Dabi is so distracted by Hawks' mouth, he nearly misses what he says next. So, let's do it. Let's get married. Dabi's heart stops. You don't mean that. His voice trembles. He doesn't understand how Hawks can keep talking with a straight face. Of course I do. Marriage is just a commitment, to stay with each other for the rest of our lives. Hawks cups a hand around Dabi's cheek. The gauze tickles his face. I think I've made myself very clear that I'm all yours. So, will you marry me? For the second time today, Dabi is glad his shear ducts are burnt out. He does not want to be here. Fucking bastard laid on top of me so I couldn't leave. You're insane. You're high on pain meds, and you don't know what you're... Hey. Hawks' voice is hard now, a feather sharpened into a weapon. His eyes go cold, reminding Dabi of their first meeting, which feels like a lifetime ago. Not even you get to tell me what I want. Got it? If you don't want to, that's fine, but don't... I didn't say that. What? Dabi groans. Trust Hawks to take a relaxing cuddling session and make it a whole thing. I didn't say I didn't want to marry you, he groans. Of course I do. Of course I want to spend the rest of my life with you, if I live that long. What I don't get is why you... There is so much he could say, but the words stick in his throat like rocks. Just seems out of nowhere is all. Where did this come from? Hawks has the decency to look a little sheepish. To be honest, thought about it while I was tied up in the commission headquarters. Dabi raises an eyebrow. You spent the time you were kidnapped and tortured planning our wedding? Hawks snorts. No. I just thought how stupid the term boyfriend is. Oh, I miss my boyfriend. Oh, I wish my boyfriend would save me. I hope my boyfriend's okay. He scrunches his nose and sticks out his tongue in disgust. Sounds like whiny garbage. My husband, on the other hand. Now that sounds powerful. Dabi is holding his head up so he can look Hawks in the eye, a position that will inevitably leave a crick in his neck tomorrow. Suddenly, all this effort feels like a waste of time. He lets his head fall back and stares at the ceiling. Are you serious? Deadly! Dobby doesn't need to look at Hawks to know he is pouting. And you vetoed me, so I'm not indulging in your furry crap. You just hate that you like it. They are silent for a while. Dobby turns everything Hawks has said over in his head, twisting each and every part of the intense puzzle that's suddenly been dropped in his lap. It's only after he turns off the bedside lamp that he speaks. Say we were to get married. What would that even look like? He feels Hawks' body jerk as he perks up. He tucks his head under Dobby's chin, warmth pressing against the scars under his jaw. He wonders if his hair would tickle, or if it would feel as silky as when he runs his fingers through it. Well, Shigaraki would officiate, obviously. He'd only agree to go if he got to be in charge. Dobby laughs and wraps his arm around Hawks, holding him with as little force as possible. Oh, he'd be insufferable. Probably would skip half of it. Exactly. It'd make it short enough for me to actually pay attention. His throat rumbles against Dobby's as he speaks. They shift together with every breath Dobby takes. Toga would be the flower girl, obviously. She'd love covering everything with red. And I call dibs on Spinner for my best man. You can have Natsu. Oh, or he can give you away. I'd be the bride. He can feel Hawks' heartbeat against his own. The warmth and weight is beginning to lull him to sleep. Obviously, whitewashes me out. We'd have to invite the rest of your siblings too. Otherwise, they think we're playing favorites. I think Fuyumi would be fine. But from what you told me about Shoto and the whole training camp thing, we may have to chain him to his chair, just for a bit. Dobby chuckles. Sleep is beginning to creep into the edges of his vision. Sure, my mom would be there, and she'd actually be happy to see me. The world feels far away. He hears Hawks respond. Anything for you. But he forgets by the morning. You have just finished listening to You Speak, It Contradicts the Lie They Live by Amethyst Unarmed. If you enjoyed the story, please leave them some feedback on archiveofourown.org/work/29210115. And if you enjoyed my reading of the story, you can find me on Twitter at twitter.com/Kaiinbed.